Yes, you're having a great conversation, and I just interrupted it. I'm sorry. So we are in order with the Early Learning Council meeting on March 17th, St. Patrick's Day. And it's a continuation of a meeting and a conversation that we've started yesterday and into last night and this morning in the Lynn Benton Lincoln Hub. And we are super excited to be here. We've learned a lot. And I apologize that it looks like we have a small number of council members. We do have some that are in the process of logging into the phone. We had a little technical difficulty. So I apologize to those of you that are following along online that we are running late, but there were technical difficulties here in the room. And then we have one council member who unexpectedly got ill overnight and not able to join us this morning, or this afternoon now. So apologies for that. So for today, as folks are still getting settled, council members, we have an agenda that the only action item for which is the approval of the consent agenda, which is at the end of the printed agenda that's in front of you. But as is our custom, we have been moving to a process where we try to gather a lot of information and listen and ask good questions on issues that we know will be coming before us for action in a month or two down the road. And so we have two of those items today. And earlier this morning we visited with the Lynn Benton Lincoln CCO, where we talked about ourselves, as we often do, as kind of the bridge that happens between healthcare, where kids first show up really, and kindergarten, which is the other end of that, both in terms of our statutory responsibilities and in terms of the span of age that this council is responsible for. And so today, we're going to talk about work that's happening at either end of that bridge. So the first thing on our formal agenda in just a few moments, we have a panel of folks, and the first set of slides is on the screen in front of you, from Oregon State University and Portland State University, that are going to give us some information about what we're learning from the kindergarten assessment that we put in place for 4.5 years ago now. There have been 3 full cycles, and we're learning a lot. And we are committed as a council, and we heard about that this morning, that the hubs are clearly hearing us committed to being a data and outcomes-driven council. And so this is really important information for us to digest statewide, and then in terms of individual populations and areas around our state. So we'll have that conversation first. And then, council members, the purpose is really for you to absorb this. We're not going to act on it. We want you to understand it. We want you to absorb it. And then after that, we're going to move to kind of the other end of the bridge. Last month, we had a joint meeting with the Oregon Health Policy Board. There are a number of activities going on to bring early learning and health closer together. We had a nice conversation with the CCO here and learned about some activities that are underway here. We have a budget note from the legislature about doing exactly the same thing on a quicker pace. They're sort of urging us and telling us we need to pick up the pace. So we'll hear a bit about some of that and the work that's ahead of us there. So that's the plan for today. Council members, are there any other items that you want or need to discuss that aren't on the formal agenda? Okay, so with that, I do want to, for the benefit of those of you who are participating by phone, and in particular council members who weren't able to join us in person, I do want to spend just a minute having the council members who are here and who were here yesterday reflect a little bit about the visits that we've had. So council members who are on the phone, and we'll do this and then we'll have Alyssa take the roll. Council members who are on the phone, were not able to join us last night. We had a fabulous conversation with a wide swath of parents from the Lynn Benton Lincoln community. And just, I want to say thank you again to the hub here and Christy in particular, for organizing that event. It was very informative and very helpful, both in terms of content and in terms of the format of how it was set up. So council members who were able to participate in that, reflections from either that or the visit we had yesterday with the hub board, or the visit this morning with the CCO board, what sticks in your mind so far anyway about this community?
I can start.
Martha?
Yeah. I particularly want to talk about the community meeting last night, which I thought was done in a very unique and interesting way, and I appreciated it. We were, instead of a big group and lots of questions, we were broken up into council and staff, one person at each table, between several of the partners, and I thought that was really interesting. My table was an elementary school with the principal, Cascade Elementary, over in Lebanon, with 4 parents and the principal. And of course, drug and substance abuse came up a little bit. Mental health came up a lot in the conversation. Principal has 360 kids. They desperately need a new playground, which I didn't mention yesterday, and they're doing a fundraiser. The building was built in 1951, and they still have the heating system from 1951, and you just kind of run that through your brain and go, wow. And their playground equipment comes from 1951. I obviously became very familiar with what they had on their playground from my days. We talked a lot about career technical education and employment and the skills gap. The one gentleman, Dad, is an electrician, and he talked about the entry electricians and where he's at, and there's about a 10-year gap of qualified people coming through. Other gentleman's in sales, drives from Lebanon into Albany every day. Both moms are stay-at-home moms. One of them has a special needs child. And it was just really interesting to talk to them. They really love their school. One has one of their kids in an alternative education. But they both said, I asked them, what do you like about your school, what you don't like? And they didn't have anything they didn't like. But 2 things they said they really felt a need for in Lebanon were extracurricular activities that they don't have for their kids. And the other one was more high-quality, affordable pre-K.
Thanks, Martha. Other reflections from our various visits in this community?
Okay, so mine is challenging because I'm home, and so I don't know if all this that I'm seeing is through my colored glasses of these are the people I already love, and but so you have to put that context around that there may be bias, and the but what I the overwhelming thing I'm walking away with is the work they did, the hard work they did to create a hub is paying off in spades. That what we heard is such a strong implementation of collective efficacy, and the we of the partners, and of course this for me amazing relationship between health and the CCO and the hub, but it went deeper because behind the CCO we were hearing primary care providers and health clinics, and and on the early learning side we were hearing that this partnership they were describing is going deeper across different kinds of parent education. So I think it's really important for the council to get out, and I know it's a challenge for us to travel around the state. But you can think and think and think about what a hub is is trying to be and what collective efficacy will look like. But until we get into a community and talk to parents and providers and the governance boards and the committees, we stay at a level of understanding that's not nearly as deep as when we come and meet. So I'm extremely impressed with what what they're making of this dream in real life.
Janet, did you want to add anything?
I think what we see in many of the rural communities we go to, it is kind of the same people on every board or group that we went to, but they have a common goal and purpose for each of those. And you know, they said we just decided we had to be aligned, and we are aligned. And they all know, they all seem to know a lot about each of the different activities and services that we talked about. And it was a high level of commitment. And then I also thought from last night, just that I say rural Oregon, and then we heard people talk about their different communities within rural Oregon and this part of Oregon, and each community had its unique challenges and strengths and what you could get here and what you could get there. And so it's just a good reminder that all of Oregon is unique.
Chair Curtis, can
Yep,
I tag on
please.
to that? So I think that what Bobby just shared is really true about this community. And I think in some of our communities where the hub is maybe not yet where we would want it to be in terms of true integration across sectors, or where even they want to be, sometimes we hear from people, well, the communities that are there yet, they've just been doing this for a long time, for decades even. And I just want to put on the record that at this time in 2014, this hub was not even yet sure what its boundaries were going to be, and they were really challenged by a lot of relationships that weren't formed yet. And so this is a hub that's an example of being able to come together and make progress in a short and pretty fast amount of time, if you're willing to make the commitment to being solutions oriented and willing to make the commitment to just putting relationships that have been challenging in the past to the side and forming new ones. And so I couldn't be more impressed with where the hub and the CCO are at in terms of partnership and integration, because I know that it happened in a very short amount of time. And it makes me excited to see, gosh, 2 more years from now, how much further down the path will they be because they're so committed to the partnership.
So I would add a lot, actually. Trying to focus the thoughts that are swimming through my head. The first thing I wanted to shout out, again, a big thank you to Christy and the Hub for the way that you organized our conversation with parents and families last night. I felt a level of intimacy with families that I got to interact with that we hadn't heretofore gotten to in these visits. And I think a level of safety on their part. It's a lot different. For those of you that weren't able to join as council members, there are like 80, 85 people there. And it's a lot scarier to speak as a parent in front of 85 people, particularly a parent that has challenges and feels a bit disempowered anyway, than it is to have dinner with somebody with 6 people at your table, some of whom you know and some of whom are just really interested in getting to know you. So thank you. I hope that we have more of I hope we learn from that as a council and have more of that. The other thing I want to just note is this really an interesting, I'm still thinking about it, but this thread of consistency that I heard across all of the visits we had. Nobody talked about it in exactly the same way, but the parents at my table anyway last night, when I asked what was good and challenging about being parents in this community, they all had the same response. And it wasn't about being parents, it was around all of the stuff of being parents. It was jobs and housing and transportation and all of those, in healthcare we call those the social indicators of health. It's kind of the family indicators of being a parent and raising a child. And it was what drove home for me is, they were essentially saying, kids are raised in our families and it's our family challenges that make it difficult for us to be parents. It's not the challenges of our kids, it's our family challenges and our economic and our community challenges. So kids raised in families best in communities. And then seeing the communities here really, although they're not saying it in the same way that the families did, really the theme is all of the kids in our community are our kids. And really, until we grab that and make that part of our culture, we're not going to make progress on the indicators and the data. And we're going to see kindergarten assessment here in a minute. But this community really trying to wrap itself around its families as a community. And we saw that in the CCO conversation this morning, where they're trying to think of childbirth education as really building strong families and parents, regardless of individual programs that previously existed. And we heard from a school district superintendent last night about turning the elementary schools in his district into two types, P through 2 or 3, so that it starts with preschool and goes all the way into the early years, and then, third grade on up. So just, I'm still processing it, but really fascinating. So I've learned a lot, and thank you for having us. Okay. Yep. So it sounds like we're continuing to have some audio difficulty on the phone. We'll do the best that we can. I can project a little bit better. You might want to leave it just even closer here because of our speakers, but I'll try to be better about projecting. So for those of you on the phone, again, sorry for the technical difficulties. We've just been doing kind of opening reflections as a council about our time here in the Lynn Benton Lincoln Hub. So with that, I think we'll go ahead and get started on our official agenda. We are going to run a little late. I will tell you that because we got started late due to the difficulties, and my apologies for anyone for whom that cramps your schedule. But I don't want to shortchange the really important conversations that we are going to try to have today. So Alyssa, can I ask you to take the roll, please?
Cam Curtis.
Here.
Do you have Harriet on the phone?
Why don't you come over here? No.
Here.
Janet Doherty Smith.
Here.
Do we have Kali on the phone? Charles McGee. Eva Ripito. Do we have you still, Eva?
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to unmute.
No worries. Lynn will not be joining us. Terry and Clyde are excused as well. Bobby Weber.
Here.
And Megan Irwin. Here. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. And thanks for hanging in on the phone, Eva. I appreciate that. So are there any other council members on the line that did not have a chance to answer the roll call? All right. Eva, I know you have to leave early for another meeting, but feel free to just jump in as we go, and I'll try to be good about pausing occasionally and checking in to see if there's anything you want to add into the conversation. So with that, I'd like to invite our guests from PSU and OSU to come forward, and I'll ask you to try to project into this wonderful little unit right here. Should we move it again, Alyssa, maybe to the middle?
What if we did this?
I can.
Could this take?
Oh, good idea. Sorry, folks on the phone, we're doing a little shifting around to try to accommodate the sound difficulties. Thank you for your patience.
I think that's where the sound is.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Great. Thank you very much. We're super excited to hear what you have to say.
Well, thank you, and thank you for having us here today. We are really excited to be able to present some of the work we've been doing with the kindergarten readiness assessment to you all. We see you all as one of our primary stakeholders. I mean, we want to use these data in ways that you guys can make meaning of the data and have action steps come about as a result of the work that we're doing. And so we're appreciative of having access to these data. We're appreciative of having a chance to talk with you what we're working on. And we hope by the end of this, we can have a better sense of the questions you all are asking so that the work that we do moving forward can be addressing those questions that you have. So I thought we would begin by just introducing the panelists, and then I'll give a little context to our research consortium, and then we'll go down the panel and go through presentations. My name's Andy Mashburn, and I'm an associate professor of psychology at Portland State University.
I'm Lizzie Tremaine. I'm a grad student of Andy's at Portland State.
My name is Lupe Diaz. I'm a doctoral candidate at Oregon State University working with Dr. Megan McCollin.
And my name's Alicia Miao. I'm also a doctoral candidate at Oregon State University.
And we are here representing the Oregon School Readiness Research Consortium. We're a group that started about 2 years ago thanks to some funding from the Ford Family Foundation. And we have a steering committee comprising myself, Megan McClellan, and Catherine Pears, who's down at the Oregon Social Learning Center. And really the idea behind our consortium was to get early childhood researchers together to see what would happen, to just set a platform where we could have conversations and we could figure out what research we can do that makes sense of and meaning of the problems, the issues, the situations we have locally. Catherine, Megan, and I see each other in Washington, D.C., hotel lobbies all the time, at federal meetings and grant panels, and so we thought we should bring this back and see what we can do in Oregon. So we've had quarterly meetings at each of at different sites, and what happens, as you all may know, is if you give early childhood researchers access to a statewide, population-wide data set of kindergarten readiness, that a lot of things can come from it. And so what we want to do today is present some of the work that we've been doing in our first pass through these data. We see many opportunities to continue this kind of work. And again, at the end of each presentation will be about 15 to 20 minutes. We'd love to hear any thoughts that you have at the conclusion of each presentation. We also hope there's a time for some open discussion afterwards so we can hear more about your thoughts about our work. Lizzie.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having us. I'm really excited to talk about the work that I've been doing with Andy, as well as a fellow grad student, Rita Yelverton, back at Portland State. All right. As most of you in this room are familiar, the kindergarten transition is quite a big deal for children. There are a set of unique expectations that are unique to the kindergarten environment. Goals, demands, and nature of evaluation are different from nearly anything kindergartners have encountered before. Because the nature of kindergarten changes, some children are more ready than others to meet these goals based on their previous experiences. And that's why we care about assessing school readiness at the beginning of kindergarten. We're interested in seeing how school readiness skills might influence the way children transition into kindergarten. So, a quick reminder about the pieces of the Oregon Kindergarten Assessment. There are two big sections. There's the early academic skills section, which assesses early literacy skills as well as early math skills, and the approaches to learning section, which includes some non-academic skills such as self-regulation, how they're able to regulate their attention and behavior in the classroom, and interpersonal skills, how they're able to interact with peers and the adults around them. The goals of the study that I'm going to be discussing today are to use this awesome data set to describe entering kindergartners as they move into kindergarten. We want to look at profiles of kindergarten readiness that are intuitive and practical to elementary school teachers and policymakers and researchers alike. We're interested in seeing the kids, not just the variables. The second goal is to explore some of the developmental implications of these profiles. All right, so we have our two dimensions of school readiness. Early academics is across the bottom, and the approaches to learning dimension is vertical. And going into this data set, I hypothesized that there'd be probably about 4 groups of kids. Kids who are coming in either with high on both of those skills. They're coming in ready to regulate their attention in the classroom. They're coming in with their ABCs and their 1, 2, 3s. And then on the other side of that, there are the kids who come in with very little resources at the beginning of kindergarten. They're not used to regulating their behavior in the classroom. They're not used to interacting with kids, and they haven't necessarily had the experiences that might give them academic skills. And that's kind of how we traditionally think about things. These are two related skills, so maybe there's kids who are high on both and low on both. But I was thinking, what if there are some kids who come in with unique skill sets, unique resources that they can use, such that maybe they're not familiar with their ABCs and 1, 2, 3s at the beginning of kindergarten, but they're able to pay attention and follow rules and interact with their peers in acceptable ways. On the other hand, there might be some kids who are not ready to be necessarily in the kindergarten classroom, not prepared to regulate themselves, but they know their ABCs, 1, 2, 3s. They're familiar with the more academic expectations of the kindergarten classroom. So that's what I hypothesized. This is what I found. In addition to those 4 groups, there are some things that I didn't expect to see. There are kids, does it? Yes. Down here in this orange group, there are kids who are so low on both early academics and approaches to learning skills that they are a group, a profile all their own. Additionally, and I'll talk about them in just a second, more specifically, there's this group up here, which are maxing out in their ability to regulate in the classroom, maxing out in their ability to interact with peers and teachers, so much so that they are defined by their ability to be super regulators in the classroom, and that's what I call them, and you'll see in a second. All right, walking through the profiles. First, we have our high highs, high approaches to learning skills, high academics, and this constitutes about 25% of the total sample of entering kindergartners in Oregon. Additionally, we have our low approaches to learning and low academic skills, our purple group here. They also account for about 25%. So thinking about things in a more variable-centered way, if you're expected those 2 skills to be paired together, you'd only be accounting for about 50% of the kindergartners in Oregon. Looking at our off-diagonal clusters, we can see down here we have our low approaches to learning and high academic skills, about 18%. And the yellow group up here, our high approaches to learning group or low academic group, about 17%. So that encompasses about 85% of the kids. But let's take a look at some of the ones I didn't expect to see. Down here we have our very lows, that's what I'm calling them. They're not just below average, they're very low below average on approaches to learning skills and early academic scores, and it's about 5%. And up here, I circled it so you can see on the smaller graph, are what I'm calling our super regulators, and that accounts for about 10% of the entering kindergartners. Now, I was very interested in talking about who makes up these clusters. It's one in profiles of kids. It's one thing to say that, oh, there are 6 groups of entering kindergartners, but what does that mean? What experiences influence where they end up at the beginning of kindergarten? So looking at some key distinguishing characteristics across the groups, I'll just go down the line. Our high approaches to learning, high academic skills group, they were only about 35% economically disadvantaged. This was the lowest composition of economically disadvantaged students. And only about 6% of them were English language learners. Down here, we're moving down to our purple group, our low academics and low approaches to learning group. Contrast this with our high group, 72% were economically disadvantaged. This was the highest group. And 33% were English language learners. So looking at those primary diagonals, the high, high, the low, low, they introduce a very interesting contrast here on those 2 demographic skills. All right, our low approaches to learning and high academics group was about 38% female, so mostly boys in the this kind of wiggler group, the kids who are coming in with lots of academic skills and not as much visible regulation skills in the classroom. 10% were English language learners. In the opposite diagonal group, if you look up our little map. It's our high approaches to learning, low academic skills. These kids were mostly girls, 57% female, and there were quite a few English language learners here. Now for our smaller groups, the orange group right here are very lows. Nearly as many economically disadvantaged kids, well, nearly the proportion was about the same as in our purple group, but we had 37% special education referrals. Also our lowest composition of females. And finally, our super regulators, those 10% way up there, they were mostly female and all very, very little special education referrals.
Are these all 4-year-olds?
These are the OKA assessment data. So
From 13, 14.
4, 5.
yes,
Okay.
probably about 5.
Probably 5, 6.
Yeah.
Yeah, because 6
as
is
of September 1st.
yeah. Thank you. The second goal of this study was to explore the implications across time with these profiles. Caveat, we don't have longitudinal data yet, and we're hoping to move forward with that, merging some data so we can do this with the OKA data, but we weren't able to do that yet. So instead I was looking at, I'm sorry.
A quick question.
Yes.
Which year are these data from?
This is the entering class of
2013.
2011. Oh, I'm sorry. This data or the kindergarten assessment data?
The kindergarten assessment data, I'm sorry.
Oh,
I
the OKA.
apologize.
Fall.
What you just went through.
Fall 2013.
Thank you, guys.
Okay.
So, this, however, the ECLSK data that I used to kind of extrapolate out was for the class of 2011.
Thank you.
As you can see, things look a little different with this data set. So I made some leaps and said that this cluster here represents this profile here, and here, and here. You can see that there's some connections, but also some missing pieces, primarily due to the fact, I imagine, that this is a nationally representative data set as opposed to looking at the population of Oregon, as well as some different measurement techniques. But moving forward with this, I was able to find some interesting things. At the beginning of kindergarten, over here, let me just orient you to this slide. We have the rank of math skills at the beginning of kindergarten. So our high highs were our highest group. Our super regulators were second in line. Our high academic skills but low approaches to learning group were third. Our low academics and high approaches to learning were fourth, and our very lows were fifth. Now, keeping that in mind where they started, let's take a look at how they changed across the year. We can see that those kids, our yellows with the high approaches to learning scores, with high regulation skills, they grew the most across the year. And I find that very interesting. They started out second to lowest when we're looking at the rank at the beginning of the year, but they changed the most across the year. And we see similar findings in the rank where they start at the beginning of year in reading scores. And while the approaches to learning strength group with the low academics didn't grow more than some of them, they certainly improved more than our very lows right here, our orange group. And they started out about the same level of academics, but those kids with the approaches to learning skill at the beginning of kindergarten improved more across the year academically.
Can you clarify the source of this data now?
This is the ECLSK. Yeah, so this is me, take it with a grain of salt when we're talking about Oregon kindergartners, but it's something that we're hoping to be able to accomplish with the...
It's a nationally representative sample of entering kindergartners in 2011, 20,000 children who they're following through probably 5th or 8th grade. They have data available through 1st grade now for them.
Now, we didn't have any way to assess social development at the beginning of the year, primarily because closeness with the teacher is something that takes time to develop. So this is just end of year closeness with the teacher. And we can see that our super regulators are on great terms with their teacher. They're very close to their teacher at the end. On the other end, our very lows and our high academics and low approaches to learning group, they're not having poor relations necessarily with their teacher, but it's lower than the rest of their class. So that means it's something interesting. And finally, end of year conflict with teacher. This is where we see some big differences across the groups. Our wigglers and our very low group, they are having the most conflict with their teacher at the end of the year. So takeaways from this presentation today, there are 6 profiles of entering kindergartners. About 85% are represented by that original quadrant that I hypothesized, but there are 15% that don't fall into that. And ask a teacher, they'll be able to tell you who their super regulators and who their very lows are. Additionally, there are suggestions, again with a grain of salt because I'm jumping data sets here. There are suggestions that these profiles at the beginning of kindergarten can be indicators of development across the year. Our very lows are starting behind academically and developing more slowly than all of their peers across the kindergarten year. If you compare the very lows and our low academics and high approaches to learning, so the kids who are coming in with no skills on this, as we define it here, to those who are coming in with regulatory skills, they start at similar places, but the kids with their regulatory skills develop more across the year. And finally, the wigglers, the kids with high academics but low approaches to learning, and our very lows, they show the lowest levels of closeness and the highest levels of conflict with their teacher at the end of the year. So next steps, we've hinted to some of these, but just to state them here, we would love to continue the developmental analysis using the OKA pilot data, project out potentially to 3rd grade outcomes because we're approaching that. And we would love to also see how different classroom experiences can differentially facilitate development across the year. So maybe there are some kids that really thrive in a certain environment and other kids that thrive under different circumstances. Also, we would love to aggregate these profiles to the school level to be able to start characterizing schools and districts by their entering kindergartners, so we could potentially start targeting resources to the skills and communities that need them the most. That's it. Special thanks to Andy and our lab there, and also the research consortium. It's been really fun working with these data. So, thank you.
Chair Curtis, could I draw a parallel between the really fascinating research that Lizzie has done and Lizzie?
Yes, yeah.
Thank God. I hate when I get people's names wrong. And the conversation we're having later today about health.
Yes, please.
So when you look at the red bar, which is the super regulators, and think about what it takes to become a super regulator, which is strong support for your social emotional development and health and your physical development and health. And then think later about the conversation we're going to have later about work that we're embarking upon to support children's social emotional development and physical health better. I think it just really draws the link between the conversation we were having this morning with the CCO and how health it plays into the school readiness goal that we have. And to me, it helps make the case even more to our partners in health for how they contribute to children having the skills that they need when they start kindergarten.
Thank you. Really important point. Council members, let's go to the phone first. Eva, any questions or reactions at this point from you? So hearing none, or she's talking to the mute button, we'll go ahead
Or
and
did
see. any-
anybody else come on? There were two or
Charles
three
did.
bees.
It sounds like we may have Charles on the phone. Charles, are you there? All right. Council members in the room? Any reactions or questions? Martha?
I'm curious on you call them wigglers, and I think actually there may be wigglers, but then there are more severe behavioral problems. And want to know what happens when you talk about the conflict with teachers. Do you know what that conflict resolution is, or is there, or do you just know that there's conflict?
I just know that there's conflict. This is teacher-reported closeness and teacher-reported conflict at the end of the school year, and so it's a survey that they fill out for each child. It's, as far as I know, it's just a set of, multiple choice kind of questions about, I frequently have this issue with this child, or I don't have this issue with this child. So we don't know any specific information about the nature necessarily.
I'd be curious at the end of the year kindergarten piece, what teachers view as that conflict resolution is with, a wiggler's a wiggler, but when you have some more emotional issues of, throwing a chair across the room because you're extremely frustrated, what happens? And I think what happens under the surface that a lot of people aren't aware of is that we're kicking kindergartners out of school. We're kicking preschoolers out of school, which sets them up for failure for 3rd grade, 8th grade. They drop out, and then we have even more issues. So I'd be really curious in your data set if there's a way to figure out what they're doing to mitigate
There are
conflicts.
certainly limitations in what we can look at in a data set this big. For example, if I wanted to get down to specific types of behaviors, I couldn't do that with the ECLSK just because they give us the data at a certain level and I don't have the item things there. Also, big data sets rarely have things like observational data, being able to actually see what's happening in the classroom other than teacher reports of this is the structure of the classroom, this is whatever they're measuring at the teacher report level, that's easier to do on a wide scale. It's harder to do more observational work, and that's something I love that question, and I'd love to be able to look into that some more, and there are some limitations that methods-wise.
Yeah, because if you don't like your kindergarten teacher, you're probably not going to like your 1st grade teacher or your 6th grade
absolutely.
teacher. Or, let's just string it on out. Yeah. Okay, and then, and in that, it'd be interesting to know who are just the wigglers that, are a little bit hyperactive versus those that have some real hard set, I've got problems and we need help with this set of kids. You said that you wanted to do the research up to 3rd grade. Is there some kind of an ultimate further plan to at least look at them, the same set of kids through 8th grade, 12th grade, to make sure that the kids who are super achievers, 100% are graduating versus these kids down here who are highest at risk are not, and do we need to focus more in there? That'd be something I'd really be interested in too.
Yeah. I would too. What we do have access to is a pilot study that Megan's team worked on and Rob worked on, where we have kindergarten readiness assessments at kindergarten entry from 2012. And so I think this year they're taking their 3rd grade assessment. So there is a way with a small subset to start linking the implications of school readiness as measured in Oregon to 3rd grade outcomes. Besides that, I don't see that as being possible. In the ECLSK, we could potentially do that, but it's going to be 10 years before those data would be available.
We
got time, right?
time, I get that.
What's the N on the pilot data set?
On the pilot data
I think it's 1,300 or something.
Yeah.
Is that right,
13.
Alicia?
Big enough, Ann.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. This data set, of course, this is the population level, so it's about 40,000, which is amazing. But with the pilot, we could probably begin to start answering those questions.
So thank you. Bobby, did you
Well,
have one
I think it
before
will
we-
become more clear, but for me, the policy implication is to help us identify the target populations.
Yes.
And so I think that will become better. Maybe so we should hold it till the end. I mean, the oranges, it's kind of like you just want to pick them all up and hug them. It's like, what in the world is your life like? But I think what we want to get to are what would tell us that as they enter that this group of children is going to need more support. But I know we're going to learn more about that. So maybe
We'll
hold
just
that
hold it,
off
yeah, we'll
till
hold.
we get to the end.
Well, and I
Great.
think, Bobby, not only what it is, but what do they need? I mean, we know they need help. It's what.
Yeah, and just to before we turn to Lupe, I just love the way this conversation is going, is now we're talking about meaningful kids, groups of kids in these data. It's not you're a 12 on reading or whatever that means. We're talking about kids that are the wigglers, and maybe that's not the right way to call them. It's that we've got super regulators. We've got kids who are just fine coming in a high. We've got that poor group of orange kids. We're now talking about these data in a way that's meaningful to practitioners. And so really what Lizzie's starting to do with this is just be able to talk about, describe these children. The next steps in Lizzie's work is to now think about what can we do about this? What sort of instructional practices might be most beneficial for those children in the orange group or the yellow group? And so I just love that this methodology that she's using, cluster profile analysis, is practitioner-oriented analysis. It takes us researchers out of our box of just wanting to throw variables into analyses, and it's pushing us into thinking about these variables and these data in terms of a child, an individual child. And we've got 6 groups of them in here, and we're talking about them as if they're children now and not scores. And I love that Lizzie's pushing things in that direction.
Yeah, I mean, to both of these points, and I know we want to have a bigger conversation. I mean, I want a profile within the profile, right? To understand what that looks like, and not just going forward in terms of what does an education practitioner do, but retrospectively, what do we do as a council with our health partners, with our, earlier on in the... All right, so before we...
What can we do to reduce the orange before they ever get to kindergarten?
Right, we want no orange. So before we turn to Lupe, I want to take just a moment to do I apologize, an item of business while we have a quorum in the room and on the phone. Oh, are they gone?
Not. They hung up.
Oh, they're going to get back on. Oh.
When they do, can you let us know so that we can take care of that?
Yeah, we have a consent agenda or a consent item that we need to pass while we have folks on the phone, and we have kind of people in and out. And so Alyssa will give me the high sign, and then I may interrupt you, and I apologize for that in advance. Yes.
I got to see this presentation at the research roundtable, so it was fun to see it again. And there's 3 things that occur to me. First, I wonder how full-day kindergarten might affect the final reporting. Second, I wonder how kindergarten class size affects the way that teachers respond about children. Because if I have 30 kids, I actually always like the wigglers, but it stands out more, and it's more than if I have 18 or 20.
Yeah.
And then I wonder what we can do in teacher preparation to help we who have been teachers reflect on what triggers are. Because, like you said, it's self-report. You really can't measure it. You can say, I feel close to this kid. I don't feel close to this kid. And how could we help ourselves think about that a little bit more? Because it is just a basic response, but there's probably some training or thinking that could help us see those children as needing more of us or something.
Great. All right, thank you. We'll go ahead and move on to Lupe and her presentation now. Alyssa's going to switch the slides, and then apologies for when I need to interrupt you.
So thank you, Andy and Lisa said, thank you for having us and giving us the opportunity to share some of the work that we've been doing. So my work reflects, it's around English language learners. So that's that's all I do. It's think about English language learners and how they're doing. And I would like to acknowledge Dr. Megan McCollin and Dr. Karen Thompson that give me a lot to think about every time I start thinking about English language learners. So first, I want to start by giving you a little bit of a picture of what English language learners look like. So they make up about 10% of the K-12 student population in Oregon, and that is similar to around the country. So about 10% of all students in the U.S. are English language learners. And specifically in Oregon, when about 20% of incoming kindergartners are English language learners. And as we know from research, English language learners tend to lag behind in achievement measures, especially when they're given to them in English. And they also have additional challenges as they make the transition to school. They're also more likely to experience risk factors such as low achievement, living in poverty, and having lower parental education. So we know that English language proficiency and self-regulation have both separately shown to predict achievement for children. And we know that self-regulation is an important component of bilingualism, and English language learners, of course, eventually, as they learn English, they become bilingual or dual language learners. But we know very little about the relationships between English language proficiency, self-regulation, and achievement in kindergarten. So although we know all these parts are important, we don't really quite know how they all come together to influence achievement. So first, I want to give you a little bit of definition of self-regulation, and this is what I will focus on. So the way that we define self-regulation, and this is a definition I'll be using as I move along, is that we see it as the integration of three parts. So working memory, so a child's ability to remember instructions, and this could be like when they come in, that you're supposed to put your backpack in your cubby, then you're supposed to go wash your hands, and then you're supposed to go and read a book. And then we have attention, so their ability to pay attention in the classroom. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. And inhibitory control, so their ability to inhibit an automatic response for a more positive adaptive response. So this means if I am in the classroom and the teacher will ask a question, I'll raise my hand first and wait for the teacher to call on me as opposed to just shouting out an answer. So the way we look at self-regulation is really the integration of these three skills. I also want to give you somewhat of a definition of English language proficiency. So English language proficiency is really having the English language skills to access instruction in the classroom and meet the language demands of the academic context. So although we know it's important, your ability to communicate with peers, when we think about English language proficiency, is really your ability to understand what's going on in the classroom and being really able to absorb that material. And children come in with a range of English language proficiency, so they can come in with no English at all to having a little bit more of advanced English. And there's no uniform definition of English language proficiency. So this could vary by district, this could vary by school, and or by state. So we don't, as of now, we don't have a uniform definition of English language proficiency. So based on this, this is 3 research questions that I focused on using the kindergarten readiness assessment data. So I want to know how are English language learners performing on kindergarten assessments when they're compared with Oregon kindergartners who are not identified as English language learners. And I wanted to explore the relationship between English language proficiency and the kindergarten assessments. And finally, I wanted to know what is the relationship between self-regulation skills and English language proficiency and achievement for English language learners. So this is the sample that we're using, that I'm using is from 2013, 2014. So I think they're all in the fall of 2013, but that's the year. There's a total of about a little bit over 40,000, and I guess I said about 19% of our English language learners. In gender, about the same breakdown in gender, and but you could see English language learners, there about 83% are identified as economically disadvantaged, and most of them are identified as Latino. And you could see the other breakdown, when about 75% of non-English language learners, the majority of them identified as white. And When it comes to language, these are the 3 top languages of English language learners in the state of Oregon. So most of them are, I'm sure you're not surprised, they're Spanish-speaking English language learners, followed by Russian and Vietnamese. These other 20% other languages, all of them are less than 1%. So they're Chinese, Arabic, but they all make up less than 1% of the students. And of course, English, non-English language learners, more of them are English speaking. Special education, about 10% of ELLs qualify for special education, and about 9% of non-ELLs qualify for special education. So this is, and I think Lizzie went over some of this. So the academic achievement, we're measuring emergent literacy in math using the ECCVM letter names and letter sounds, and the ECCVM mathematics. For self-regulation, we're using the child behavior rating scale, which is a teacher-rated self-regulation. The rates from a 1 to 5. And to measure English language proficiency, we're using the English language proficiency assessment, or the ELPA, which is what the state of Oregon uses to measure English language development. So for the 2013-2014 kindergarten assessments, these assessments are administered within the first 3 weeks in kindergarten. The math was administered in either English or Spanish or English. It's a bilingual version. The English literacy, so this year the English literacy was mandatory. The Spanish literacy was voluntary. So not everybody took the Spanish literacy, which for this particular presentation, because it was voluntary, I will be only showing you results from the English literacy, given that it's the Spanish one is. There's a little bit of bias in there based on who chose to took it. And as I said, the self-regulation is the teacher rated in the classroom. English language proficiency, so the way, and I'm not sure how familiar you are with this process, but children have to be officially identified by the district as English language learners before they can get any sort of support or services in terms of taking like a bilingual version of the kindergarten assessments. And this starts by parents going into in the first day, or when they go to register for kindergarten, and filling out the home language survey. If they indicate that there is any other language other than English, then they have to come back in. Children take their assessments, and that's what they use to determine English language learner status. If they are flagged as English language learners, then midway through the year they take the ELPA, or the English language proficiency, to see where they're at with their English development. So for our first research question, I broke these down by children who are economically disadvantaged and those who are not economically disadvantaged. It says, as you could see, English language learners so these are economically disadvantaged English language learners compared to those who are not. And as you could see, English language learners who are economically disadvantaged, they're scoring lower in math, letter sounds, and letter names. And of course, we would expect that because their assessment is in English, and if they don't know English, they're going to score very poorly on it. But they actually score slightly better on the self-regulation scale. So teachers rate them as slightly higher on their self-regulation skills. We see very similar patterns for non-low income or non-economically disadvantaged English language learners and non-English language learners, where we see still English language learners are still scoring as slightly lower on this on the achievement assessments, and teachers rate them slightly lower on self-regulation skills, but the difference are still very small. When we look at the relationship between English language proficiency and kindergarten assessments, as we would expect, how much English children know it is related to how well they're doing in their letter sounds, and their math, and on their self-regulation. And finally, I wanted to really explore what is the relationship between self-regulation skills and English language proficiency. And as you can see, self-regulation is as related to math, letter sounds, letter names, and English language proficiency. What I could tell you is that I could switch English language proficiency and self-regulation, and you will see very similar patterns. So what this told me is that self-regulation and English language proficiency could both be a way to support English language learners in the classroom. So just a small conclusions, a couple conclusions. We know that in the state of Oregon, English language learners are still lagging behind their English language, or are lagging behind when compared to those children who are not English language learners. And we know that self-regulation and English language proficiency are both related to academics. And supporting self-regulation may serve as additional strategies to support achievement in English language proficiency. So often, I know we see a lot of programs who are targeting literacy, and although that's great, I am all for supporting literacy. Adding some additional additional ways to support self-regulation could also serve as a protective factor. As we saw in Lizzie's presentation, those kids who have some of those self-regulation skills tend to do better academically, and they're more likely to have gains. So supporting self-regulation could also be a way of supporting English language learners and their academics and English language proficiency. So as we move forward with some of the research that I've been doing, the language of assessment is obviously an issue. I think in some of the meetings that I've had with Oregon Department of Education, I think they're now moving towards making the Spanish letter sounds and letter names mandatory for all English language learners across the state, and as well as really documenting the procedures for assessments administration, especially for those children who are non-Spanish speaking English language learners. So we know that there is the supports to assess English language learners who are Spanish speaking. It's a little harder to find other support for other languages, and this kind of goes along with the same of the procedures for data collection. How are we documenting to make sure that English language learners, all assessments are administered in the same way? And I wanted to acknowledge some of the people at the Oregon Department of Education that they've been answering all of these questions about language of assessment and English language proficiency scores, as well as the Oregon School Readiness Research Consortium that let us play with the data. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from the council? I have one.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just confused. So there was a lot of stuff there, and I was and it went fast. So can you help me with the connections and the conclusions you're drawing related to self-regulation and English language learners? Because I thought you said, or I thought the slide showed that there wasn't a huge difference between the self-regulation scores of English language learners and non-English language learners. But then when you talked about kind of conclusions about how increasing self-regulation would have an impact.
Right. So they're almost like two different questions. So one, I really wanted to see where their English language learners and non-English language learners, whether they were being rated differently by their teachers on the skills as they come into kindergarten, and we actually see very small differences, so they're rated about the same. The second question is to really explore the influence of self-regulation and English language proficiency onto achievement. So we see what is consistent with research that both of them matter.
I see.
And often when we think about providing support for English language learners, we really want to focus on their literacy skills and on their language development, because we know it's really important. But doing other things like supporting their self-regulation could also support.
I was trying to connect the two questions, and you're trying to separate them. Thank you. That's helpful.
Well, they're related, but at the same time, one of them is about how they're rating them in this particular measure in the classroom. The other one is exploring about the influence that it might have on their achievement. And I think as often when I see a lot of efforts to improve literacy, and especially when it comes to supporting English language learners. And I think adding this additional piece of supporting self-regulation could just be used as an additional strategy. And this is some of the things we've seen on the research that we do with Dr. McCollin on some of the intervention research that we've been doing, that the English language learners really benefit from supporting their self-regulation skills.
Okay, thank you very much. That's helpful. Bobby, did you have a question? No. Was it you, Megan?
I had just a clarifying question. So you were interested to see whether teachers rated ELLs and non-ELLs differently? Were you basically looking for like any kind of rate or bias in there, and then you didn't really find it?
No, so I didn't explore bias. I think that would take a little bit more, but I was just wanted to see whether there was differences on the scores that they were giving them. So, but no, I didn't. Mm-hmm.
Other questions from the council? Okay, great. Let's move on to the final presentation. Alyssa is going to shift that slide deck.
So I'm Alicia Meow with Oregon State, and Shannon Lipscomb, who's the faculty who's been leading up this project, couldn't make it today, but we wanted to thank.
Just a little.
Sure. We wanted to thank all of our collaborators, Jen Finders, Bridget Hatfield, Brianne Kathari, and Catherine Pears. We've all been working on this project together. And also thank the School Readiness Research Consortium and the Oregon Department of Education for help in getting this project going. Okay, so I think I'm just going to jump right into our research questions. This project is a project that focuses on communities in Oregon. And so we know that school readiness develops within children and families. And we also know that interventions and policies are often implemented across whole communities, like districts or counties, with the intention of improving school readiness for children across a given geographic area. So our approach with this work was really to take that community level perspective and examine the kindergarten assessment scores by looking at how kindergarten assessment scores differ across communities within Oregon, and then also what helps explain these differences. And so we're a little bit further along on the first research question here. And what I'm going to be presenting for the second research question are our preliminary findings and where we've landed so far. So we used kindergarten assessment data from the 2014-15 school year. So this is a little bit different than what Lizzie and Lupe just presented. It's 1 more year we were able to examine communities in Oregon at 3 different levels. We looked at the level of the school. We were able to look at 706 schools within 178 school districts in 36 counties across Oregon. And as you can see in the note on the slide there, schools with scores for less than or equal to 3 children were considered missing in this analysis. And we did this because we didn't consider those scores to be reliable measures from 1 year to the next. So for example, some of these were very small schools, and there might have been only 1 child that was assessed within that school, within 1 district. And so that 1 child's assessment score would have been representing the entire district. So that's why we decided to have these as missing in the analysis at this point. Our approach was to try and link the kindergarten assessment data with other data about these communities from various sources. And I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about those sources on the next couple of slides. But I first want to mention that as we move forward, it's important to keep in mind that we can't determine causality in the links between community factors and kindergarten assessment scores, and we're just modeling associations and relationships. Oops. There we go. Okay, so the data about communities that we looked at were generally from 3 broad categories. We looked at a variety of community factors, and we included sociodemographics, but we also wanted to go beyond sociodemographics to make sure that we were looking at a lot of different factors that might be influencing children and their kindergarten assessment scores. So we also looked at health and well-being factors and factors related to early learning. And so as you can see on this next slide, this is a list of some of the variables that we looked at in these different larger domains. And we looked at a whole variety of sources where we could find information on the 3 different levels, at the level of the school, level of the school district, and the level of the county. We hope that there are other sources that we can use moving forward, but this is just kind of where we've landed right now. So just to give you an idea of where we drew some of our data from, some of the county level data includes sources like the U.S. Census's American Community Survey, the Oregon Uniform Crime Reports, the Oregon Public Health Assessment Tool, the Oregon Behavioral Risk Factor Surveillance System. Our source for school and district level data are the Oregon Department of Education. So for instance, our measure of economic disadvantage that you see listed under sociodemographics is at the level of the school, and this is the percent of children who are eligible for free or reduced lunch. Another example is our measure of nutrition under health and well-being, and this is at the county level. And this is a measure that is an average of limited access to healthy foods and food insecurity that was created from data pulled from the USDA Food Environment Atlas, the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, and the American Community Survey.
Can you talk just briefly about the source of the data under the 2 points you have for early learning?
Yes, thank you for asking about that. So for early learning, we have access to ECE programs and quality of ECE programs. So these are both at the county level. And the access to ECE programs is the estimated number of child care slots per 100 children under age 13. And we also included an indicator of quality that's preliminary, because the quality rating and improvement system's so new. It's actually based on the quality structural indicators. And it's to approximate the percent of all licensed programs in each county that would be ready to achieve a star 3 or higher in the personnel category. So it's a little bit more about
Whether they've
training.
achieved it or not, it's a different question. Yeah. got it.
Right.
Thank you.
So here are some initial findings, and these are our school level averages for kindergarten assessment scores in 5 domains of self-regulation, interpersonal skills, math, letter names, and letter sounds. And these are school level averages and ranges. So for example, if we look at the average for mathematics, we can see that this is the score of, if we take all of the school averages across the entire state of Oregon, this would be the average school math score of
Individual
8.12.
child's school.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
The ranges are what tell the story.
Fascinating, aren't they?
So, right. Exactly. That's a great point. So down at the lower end, we have a school that has an average math score of 4.5, and up at the higher end, we have a school that has an average math score of 11.87. So we wanted to just kind of dig a little bit deeper into this variation in terms of variation at the school level, variation at the district level, and variation between counties. And to do that, I'm going to show you an example of scores at those 3 different levels in 3 counties within Central Oregon. And we're going to look at Crook, Deschutes, and Jefferson just as an example of math scores. And these are 3 counties that are served by one early learning hub in Central Oregon. So here we can see, again, this is math scores. These are the average school level math scores in the 3 counties. We can see that in Jefferson County, the average of all of the schools average math scores is 7.52, and in Crook County, it's 9.14. If we look into a county, for example, Deschutes County, there are 3 districts in Deschutes County, and here we see those 3 districts and the average school math scores for those districts. And we can see variation even within Deschutes County. If we looked further at then the schools within each of those districts, I just wanted to point to Ben Lapine School District. So the average at the district level of 8.56 is really close to the overall Deschutes County average of 8.71. But when we look at the schools in the Ben Lapine School District, the school scores range from an average of 6.65 all the way up to a school that has an average math score of over 10. And if we look at the other 2 counties, Jefferson and Crook County, in Jefferson we can see that there are also 3 school districts. With Jefferson District, we can see a range there of the schools in that district. There was only 1 school in the Culver School District. Black Butte is one of those examples where there were 3 or fewer children in the school in that district, and so it's not included in the analysis. For Crook County, Crook School District is the only school district in that county. When we look at the school scores, again, we can see a variation in those scores at the school level from just under 8 to just under 12. So that's an example. And now we're going to come back to the whole state of Oregon to answer our first research question, which was looking at how much variability there is in scores in the 5 kindergarten assessment domains at the level of the school, the district, and the county across Oregon. So what you're seeing up here are percentages of the variability in kindergarten assessment scores at the school level. That can be the percentage of variance or differences between schools that can be explained at the school level, the district level, or the county level. And we can see that quite a bit of that variability is at the school level, differences between schools. There's also some substantive differences and variability to be explained, particularly if we look at these academic domains, math, letter names, and letter sounds at the district level. And we think there's also some substantive variance to be explained at the county level. And I just wanted to illustrate these percentages with some pie charts just to give you kind of a visual illustration of what we're looking at here in terms of variability. So, for example, if you were to look at the bottom right-hand corner letter sounds, in the light blue we have the school level, so we have a lot of variability. If we look at 100% of the variability in letter sounds, differences between schools, a lot of that variability is to be explained at the school level. And then we have a good pie chunk in the dark blue at the district level, and then also some variability to be accounted for at the county level.
So you see this difference. So it's the social and self-regulatory skills where it's almost all being consumed at the school level.
School level. Can I ask a question? So for those of us who are not trained researchers, which is not me, what is the variability really telling us?
Megan, I can't hear.
Pam and Bobby, who have way more of a research background than I do, are both gasping at the variability. But
She shows a slide and
I do not. I don't have that kind of a research background, and probably a lot of the folks watching don't, and folks in the audience may not. So can you give me just the 1 minute explanation of why that would cause these trained researchers to gasp so deeply when looking at it? Well, and they can chime in if they like to. So for me, I think about it in terms of when we looked at those ranges in scores, you have some schools where the average of all of the schools or all of the children in that school, say for example with letter sounds, or even back here, if we looked at some of these ranges, there's one school in the Ben Lapine School District, as an example, with an average school math score of 6.65. So if we were to think about what that school might look like and how the scores in that school and the children might be different from the school in which there are children scoring over 10 on an average, that's a pretty substantive difference in terms of those math scores. And so it's really talking about what are the differences between our schools, and then even after accounting for that, are there differences then on top of that at the district level, things that we can look at that are different between school districts that might also explain differences between schools. So it helps us ask some, because I had noticed the variability statewide in letter sounds from less than 1% up to, I think it was 20 something. So that, I think, pushes us to be able to ask more data-driven questions about the disparities that cause that really big variance.
Well, and the altitude of those disparities, right? Is it a county-wide issue? Is it a district, something that happens, in the district? Is it a school? Yeah.
School catchment area. Okay, thanks. I kind of suspected that, but wanted to make sure I was actually going down the right thought pattern.
Okay, so in my mind, and this will be later when we get into implications, and I'd really like, to start connecting the studies in that conversation. But if you're talking about where should we be focusing our resources? Where are children coming to school with real challenges? To be told that that's differentiating by the by the school itself, says, it looks like we should seriously consider targeting school boundaries, that there are elementary catchment areas that have a much bigger share. And I mean, those were pretty outstanding numbers to see that much variance was captured at the school level. Says you're probably not going to go too far wrong looking at elementary school catchment areas. Now, I don't want to over jump, and I want us all to discuss it, but that's why you hear somebody like me looking at a number like that and saying, ooh, pay attention. It's because it has such direct implication for for where resources are going to change things.
Thank you.
Well, and we have hubs actively targeting their
It's
interventions
very
around
affirming.
hotspot. Yeah, right.
Very affirming of, like, I remember the first hub, reading their proposal. They said, we're going to target this elementary school area, So it's very affirming for the strategy that they had adopted. So that's why you got my reaction.
Yeah, and Alicia, we move to the next slide because I think giving an example to illustrate the variation, actually the one that gives the pie charts. So for something like letter naming, what we have with these scores is an average of a school, we have an average of a county, we have an average of a district. Those are the three levels. We get those averages simultaneously. What this is saying is, okay, there's variation now across schools, there's variation across counties, there's variation across districts. Where does that variation lie? If you look at something like letter naming, there's very little difference on average from one county to the next on those letter naming scores. The slice of variation, the slice of that pie is very thin. There is some district level variation, a substantial part of letter naming, but really in all cases, most or nearly all of the variation in scores is from one school to the next to the next. So to your point, Bobby, this is now probably the level at which targeting resources makes a lot of sense because that's the level at which we're finding a lot of the differences in scores.
Thank you.
So target the school with the lower score versus target all schools.
Exactly. I think if you were to say, let's target counties, you would be left with, well, there's not much variation across counties. They're all pretty much the same. So it doesn't leave you much for targeting. If targeting is the goal, then the school level targeting, I think, gives you more meaningful information.
Can you explain that district level pie? Because I view the school as part of the district. So that's a little confusing to me.
Yeah, so this is nested analysis. So it's basically variation across schools within a district. And then you have variation across districts, and then you have variation across counties. So yes, they're subsumed within that district, and that's really what you're interested in, is that variation across schools within districts, which is different than the variation from one district to the next.
Okay.
Thank you, Bobby and Andy. That was great. So I want to move on to our second research question, which was what helps explain these differences in kindergarten assessment scores. And so earlier I showed you a slide with our 3 broad domains that we looked at, and we had a lot of factors that we looked at. From this point forward in the presentation, I'm just going to be focusing on those factors for which we've found some evidence for statistical significance and association with at least some of the kindergarten assessment domains. And so you can see those variables here. And at the school level, we've actually only had one variable. It's the percent of children eligible for free or reduced lunch, which we've been able to test. And again, focusing on ranges, you can see here that while 58% of schools over the entire state, schools over the entire state overall have 58% of children eligible for free or reduced lunch, we have schools all the way on the lower end, one school that has just under 5% of children eligible for free or reduced lunch, up to a school with almost 95% of children eligible for free or reduced lunch. At the district level, again, we just had one variable so far that we've tested, and this is the percent of children from racial or ethnic minorities. Again, you can see that range. One district with no children from racial or ethnic minorities, all the way up to a district with above 80%. And then at the county level, what you see here are 3 of the variables that, again, moving forward, that we've found some indication of significance and association with some of our kindergarten assessment scores. And these are number of child care slots per 100 children, limited access to healthy foods, and the percent of adults in good physical and mental health. And so here on this next slide, we can see all of those variables that I just showed you broken down by which kindergarten assessment domain we found them to be significantly associated with. So if we first focus on the sociodemographic factors, we can see that the percentage of children eligible for free or reduced lunch is significantly associated with all 5 of the kindergarten assessment school level domains, and the percentage of children who are ethnic or minorities at the district level is also associated with mathematics and letter names. If we focus now...
A question on that percentage of racial minority.
Yes.
Does that go back to the slides that, I don't know which one of you had, that had majority of Latino, or does it cover a broader sector of minority to pull out that they're having trouble? Did that make sense, what I just asked?
Are you asking if these are just, if minority here is defined as just being Latino?
No,
Okay.
if the majority of your percent of minority that hit this socio-demographic are Latino, because we talked about the ELL.
Yeah, I think the way that, so we have the way that this variable works in the kindergarten assessment is that they're not. We have how children identify. It is true that in the state of Oregon, the largest percentage of those who identify as an ethnic minority are Latino. But this is just everybody. So she's not saying it's specifically Latino. It's just a breakdown of the state of Oregon, that the majority of those who identify as an ethnic minority will identify as Latino.
Okay, so
Is that
two
what
kind
you're-
of separate data points.
It's not as, this is not as nuanced I guess I would say as looking at the different racial and ethnic minority, like in terms of Latino or African American, or it's not broken down to that degree.
Okay.
Yeah. So if we look at the early learning domain, we can see that childcare slots per 100 children was significantly again, this is at the county level, was significantly associated with math, letter names, and letter sounds. And then moving on to the health and well-being domain, limited access to healthy foods was significantly associated with math, and good adult physical and mental health was significant at what we would call a trend level, which means that it's almost significant, but not quite. The reason why we've included it here is because of the small number of counties. We have a small N, 36 counties, and if we see a variable show up in some type of a pattern more than once, it's worth continuing to look at for potential substantive meaning. And so we're including it here at this time because of that.
And Alicia, it'd be good to point out the direction of these associations. I think we're sort of making assumptions, but just to be clear.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. So, yes, so these are all kind of in the direction that we might assume. So for free and reduced lunch, higher percentages of free and reduced lunch are associated with lower self-regulation, interpersonal, mathematics, letter name, and letter sound school-wide scores. Higher percentages of ethnic or racial minority at the district level are associated with lower mathematics and letter name scores at the school level. More childcare slots per 100 children, a larger proportion of childcare slots is associated with higher mathematics, letter name, and letter sound scores, and limited access to healthy foods is associated with decreased math scores. Good adult physical and mental health is associated with better math scores and better letter sound scores.
So the last one is a positive,
Yes.
where the others are negatives.
The positive is good adult physical, mental health, and childcare slots. Great, higher numbers, higher scores. The others, I think all the others have a negative association. It's more risk promotion factors. Risk factors negatively associated, promoted factors positive.
Right. So just a quick summary. These are our two research questions. We found that kindergarten assessment scores do differ across communities, and they differ a lot from school to school. Then after accounting for those differences between schools, they also sometimes differ from district to district and then from county to county. For our second research question, our preliminary findings indicate that sociodemographic factors, the percent of children in the school eligible for free or reduced lunch, and the percent of children in the district from racial or ethnic minorities are associated with kindergarten assessment scores. For early learning factors, the number of childcare slots per 100 children in the county, and some health and well-being factors are associated with kindergarten assessment scores. I wanted to note here that when we're talking about the early learning factors, the number of childcare slots per 100 children in the county, our findings you wouldn't necessarily expect that all we need to do is increase the number of childcare slots in the county and this would result in increased kindergarten assessment scores. We think that this is instead perhaps a marker for a larger maybe understanding or acknowledgement of the need to support young families, or perhaps access to resources, greater access to resources, and combined with the health and well-being factors, it may be that's what we're seeing, but that would be something for us to delve deeper into. I also wanted to note that with the early learning factors, we also looked at that quality for ECE and didn't find a significant association, and we had really limited variability in that particular variable. And so we have talked about that it's not necessarily that quality doesn't matter. It's that I think that the variable that we were using in this particular analysis just had such limited variability across counties that we're not seeing anything here for that.
Ask a quick question on the sociodemographic factors.
Yes.
So it's measurement of free and reduced lunch at the school level, but racial and ethnic measurement at the district level.
Right.
And that's not a factor of how the data comes.
That actually is a factor. That's a factor of how the data comes. So
Okay.
this actually gets into our next steps, which is that we, no, that's perfect, that we want to examine additional school level variables and the percentage of ethnic or racial minorities at the school level, as well as percent of special education, percent of dual language learners, are things that we want to look at. And these are things that we're actually actively working on right now. We've recently gotten this data at the school level from Steve Slater at ODE, and so we just haven't gotten there yet. This is our next step.
We've got addresses for for the quality indicators. We've also got addresses, so the possibility of turning those into school districts is there. Not my skill set, but you know, on the maps, we already do it on the maps. So anybody with map analytics skills could do that for us too.
That's really good to know. Okay. We're also interested in contributions of investments in early learning, and this is a question that we're asking ourselves right now. Can we quantify how these investments, like P3 or parenting education, how they contribute to kindergarten assessment scores within communities? And we also want to examine gaps in kindergarten assessment scores. So we're interested in identifying those community factors that are linked with fewer disparities in kindergarten assessment scores. So that's it, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Council members, questions for Alicia?
So many.
Right.
I'd just say keep doing it. Teach us more.
Yeah, keep doing it. Okay, keep doing more.
I have a practical, non-research-based question, but I think that all three of these presentations that we saw today are really important for the council because it helps drive policy choices. They also feel really important to me for the hubs to be able to see and to access, and at some point our early learning practitioners. And so my question to you is, how can an early learning hub that really wants to be data driven, as we've asked them to be, access you all to help them actually figure out what questions to ask about their communities, or to use especially this place-based data to help them drive their own local planning and local investments? I mean, what would be the access point?
That's a good question. I mean, you see a lot of energy around this work and interest in it, and so I would say it would probably start with an email to either myself or Catherine Pears or Megan McClellan, and just to sort of get it on our radar. And we have a lot of expertise at this table and beyond our consortium, so I think it's really just having a chance to talk individually with those interested folks. I think one of the difficulties is applying these methods just within a hub, because there's a certain level of expertise that these researchers have gotten to be able to conduct it themselves. But taking the analysis we've done and describing it at a hub level, I think would be absolutely pretty straightforward and easy to do, and something that really speaks to why we're here today and why we come to work every day, which is doing research that's meaningful, that drives change in both practice and policy. So I would say email us.
So all they have to do is ask.
Just ask, yeah.
Okay.
So my question, it's for the four of you, across studies. I think if we could, that there is a step above the individual studies, that there might be some reflections, and it's maybe too fast and asking too much. But I think there's kind of confirmation of some ideas and some good questions that come out of thinking about what we've learned independently from each study. That anyway, I can't do it fast enough. But and it might be something like consortium. But have any of you, while you were when you see each other's work, think that might explain what we found here, or like, okay, one of mine was, I'd love to see what schools those orange children are in. Mm-hmm. That's an example. It's like, I bet those orange kids are coming from a limited number of elementary schools.
Well, whenever I hear Alicia talk about it, I want to immediately talk to her and combine all of the work. And I think that's one of the steps that hopefully we'll be able to kind of integrate our findings more. As it stands right now, most of these are kind of like little isolated studies. We're kind of working with our own groups, and it would be wonderful to have a moment to integrate them together. If not at the data analysis level, which I would love to do, but also at the more conceptual, what does this mean level. So I think that's upcoming. I hope so anyway.
Yeah, I think that will be the work of our group as we meet again. And I see, Alicia, the amount of work you guys have done to compile data at school, district, and county level from disparate data sources that don't always speak to each other is remarkable. And the fact that we might be able to think about profiles of children and community, school, district level factors similar to what Bobby said, that I think is sort of the next step that we'd like to go. But I think that the magic happens when we sit down and as a group of researchers in these meetings and start brainstorming at that level and think about what we can do next. So I think there's no shortage of ideas among this group. I think time maybe short.
I think what I hear them also asking though, are what are our questions to throw into the consortium's bucket to consider.
Well, I think I gave mine early on. I mean, I want to know how we can keep the number of orange kids from ever being orange kids. I mean,
You have the upstream questions.
Yeah, I have the upstream. So as you do this, are they arriving as orange? And there's something that we can do, which I suspect. Is there something we can do prior to that so that they go in as not orange? I mean, you've got another group of kids in there that are, they need help too, but what is it that we can stop the flow and have them prepared before they ever go in?
And I think that stems off of Alicia's work, really. I think that's the implications of that work, is we know where kids are, we know where they end up. I mean, that really is an ending point if you think about it one way, and not just a beginning point. What are those downstream things that contribute to that, with Alicia's group compiling anything that one can compile that's a number, to be able to think about an explanation as to how and why children are entering that way. So I think it's on our radar. I think the work is probably still being done to compile, and I feel like that's probably our next step in terms of addressing it toward the orange.
Are there some pieces that we know before they ever hit there that they have some social emotional issues, and can we get the EI, ECSE help prior to so that they end up able to go in? If it's an issue of free and reduced lunch, then we know that we're looking at an economic or a poverty issue, and do we need to get books into the kids' hands prior to? I mean, I have had START teachers that tell me kids show up never having seen a book. So how do you know that they can even identify the letters or do the sounds, because they've never even touched a tangible book? And if those are some of the things, which are small, minor, or larger, that we can do on the early learning side, let's do them, for God's sakes. Let's quit messing around with K to 12 and get them ready.
There you go again.
Yeah, there I go again.
So, to me,
Loopy had something.
I think to your point of, not that I want to say go ahead to K to 12. One of the things that I think for me when I think about English language learners is that we are not identifying officially as English language learners until they enter kindergarten. So I think one of the things that we could do at pre-K is identify them a lot earlier once they come into a pre-K program, and start offering language support and training for teachers on how to best address the needs of English language learners are they coming in, as opposed to waiting until they're officially identified in kindergarten.
Can I tag on to that before Janet goes? I heard somewhere, and I don't know where it was, but that English language I can say it, English language learners, ELLs, actually have some academic abilities that are better than single language learners. And why are they so far behind when they have that? I mean, to me, that's a plus, and yet it seems to end up in our school systems as a negative.
Well, I think it's very consistent with what research says, that if you support a child's native language, they actually do better later, right? As opposed to throwing them into an English-only classroom. I think, though, that it's also a very complex picture, where you're thinking that English language learners are not only coming in with having to learn another language, but they're also more likely to live in poverty. They're also more likely to probably have less access to resources. So I think it's a very complex picture, and really to think about what we're expecting of them. I was at the English Language Learners Alliance conference, the state conference, and somebody put it as, think about what we're expecting of them. So of an English-speaking child, we're only expecting of them to learn content, right? And we're expecting them to meet standards in content. But an English language learner or dual language learner, we're expecting them to learn content and to learn the language simultaneously. So what are the supports that we can give to them to do that, and how early could we do it? We probably should not be waiting until they're in kindergarten. We should be identifying them in pre-K, as well as offering teachers the training to better serve those students and really get this away from the myth that just teaching them English is the best way to go, because that's not consistent with research. What we know is that a child supporting their native language skills, whether it be in reading, writing, that is going to help them later on with their English language development and with achievement in English.
There's a part of me that wants to take, because there are implications here at the individual child level. You just spoke to some of them, Lupe. There are implications here at a programmatic level, at a hub level, or a school district level. There's just lots of implications. So part of me wants to take this and organize it, to your point, and help organize it for hubs, because individual hubs don't have necessarily the capacity individually to organize this. I feel like we as a counselor or division ought to help organize. Here's this incredible set of data that we have and is growing. And here's some of the initial findings, they're going to change. And here are some of the initial implications they're going to and they should change. But there's a part of me that wants to start organizing all of this and help hubs figure out where should you dive in, or if you're the hub that we just visited with, and you're trying to, there are huge implications for what we've been talking with you about here. So anyway.
Yeah. Same.
But when we look at success, what I believe I know is that children, the self-regulation, the social skills are what make and break you in school, not the letter sounds and number sound. I mean, not that they're not important. Then I'm also wondering, are we even expecting the right things of children at kindergarten age?
What do you mean?
Well,
you mean the right set of skills?
Kindergarten is the old first grade, and 4-year-old preschool is the old kindergarten, and yet children still come with a brain that hasn't changed in size. And so are we I'm troubled. Are we pumping the wrong thing, expecting the wrong things? Do the oranges stay orange? Do the greens stay green? Or does maturation kick in? I mean, I remember learning that way back, that children develop at different rates. Some develop language much earlier. Some have very good language skills. And so that is my current worry. Are we doing the right thing with kindergarten? And you look at, I'm not big on the research part. I don't read all that much, but you see other countries don't even introduce letters and numbers until age 6 or 7, but the kids can get along, negotiate, play.
It's those life skills or approaches to
Yeah,
learning
so
that
are
you're
we-
emphasizing.
So are we expecting the wrong things, let alone of language, kids being tested in letters in a language they don't get? And I know that we're not sophisticated enough yet to say that we're not doing that. And there is bias why we test children who don't speak English in English. So that just worries me. I got the new book, The Importance of Being Little, and I can't say I've read it yet. Maybe some of you have. But she kind of talks about how can we help kids develop brains, thinking, collaboration skills and stuff, and not through just the academic and more and more. And
I'm just tickled to hear you say that our Early Learning Council is upholding this idea that social and interpersonal and self-regulation skills are the things that we want children to have when they enter kindergarten. If you rewind 5 years, there was none of this conversation about self-regulation and social emotional skills in any meeting around kindergarten entry. It was all about what we can measure easily, which is letters and numbers. And so the fact that we're even measuring it and having conversations about it and questioning some of our underlying assumptions about this push toward academics just tickles me. I think, though, what you're saying is we don't know that much about the implications, though, of coming in with different profiles. And that's what Lizzie's work is moving on with her thesis. And when you see results like children who come in with lower academic skills but have the self-regulatory skills when they enter kindergarten, those kids develop at a faster rate in math than any of those other profile kids, which sets up the conversation of, yeah, maybe some of these self-regulatory skills are the precursors, are the things you need to then get the academic skills when you enter kindergarten. And I think there's a lot of empirical work that needs to play that out. I think there's a lot of work to understand which profile of child needs which sort of activities to promote their development, and I feel like that's where we're headed. But just the fact that we're starting that conversation not just with academics, but academics and social self-regulatory as being what we're talking about, and then having conversations around self-regulatory social is really probably what we should be thinking about for 4-year-old kids who have the right to play.
Right, and then there's more variability across that. When you looked at some, I mean, you sort of take this and trickle it across this thread across the 4 presentations, or the 3 presentations that the 4 of you made. There's more variability at the district level. Well, there's more variability. There's more variability at the school level, not the district level. The others are, if the variability, it's more of a shared across district or county, and there's a higher correlation with some of the other factors that this council has talked about and tried to target. Free and reduced lunch, for example, as a proxy for poverty or low income, right? For example. So, Martha, and we're going to take just a few more minutes and then we're going to start to wrap this up.
Well, I think it all comes down, at least for me, it's the age-appropriate assessment. And the fact that we keep going to the letters and the numbers, and I guess I get some of that, but it is, for me, it's, the social, emotional development of the child, and they do develop, at different stages. And I have to ask myself, at what stage do we expect kids to pop out of the womb with a PhD? I mean, they need to be kids.
I wonder one final thing about, we have so many pressures now on teachers, and you're going to be evaluated and how successful the children you're serving are. And then you look at the kids, the kindergarten kids who are not keeping up, and that could affect how I interact with them. I mean, how I individualize for them or treat them or teach them to have self-regard, because they're the ones that are going to get my pay reduced in some places. I feel like how the teacher is a key to a lot of this, and helping them and not putting the wrong pressure on them.
But if we do our job,
Yeah.
there's less of an issue. What you just described is less of a risk or
Right.
a scary thing.
But that is that thing when you just say, I mean, I didn't have very many kids that really bothered me, but you'd get that one kid and, oh, you came again today.
That was probably my son.
But I mean, I really, I didn't have too many kids like that, but they're, and I was way younger, so I didn't reflect on it. I probably thought it was the kid's fault, not mine, but it's just interesting to think about.
Bobby?
Well, this finding of the variance at the school levels talks to me about the importance of our data being able to be broken down so that people can see at that level. And if you work hard with the interactive map, you can do that, but you have to work hard. And so what's been, I mean, I've had some short conversations with people, and there's a possibility shared services could do it for us. But my understanding of map analytics is that there is the capacity that we have all those descriptors on the map, and they're at the address level.
Yeah.
And so if we could access map analytic skill set through shared services or whatever, that way, I think we could give hubs district level descriptors. I mean, maybe they don't need it. Maybe it's so obvious that they could tell us already. But it would tell us a lot about some of these upstream factors, because we'd be putting in, we could put in prenatal, how many of the babies were born with the mother having had prenatal care, and we could put in some of these really early, anyway, I just want to get it on the agenda at some time for us to think about.
Yeah, you're trying to organize it too, right? Like to make it useful.
Right, it would be a way of making more accessible the kinds of work that the research team is doing. It wouldn't answer the questions the way they are, because you need the whole research designed to do that.
Right.
But it could give you information.
There's a lot of power in making the data transparent so people can access and use it. I mean, there's
Right.
tremendous power in what you all are doing, and there's tremendous power different in making that information available and transparent so that
Yeah, and-
people can use it. So
And they
that
can go
Christine
together.
and-
I
Right,
mean, if
exactly.
we could get some of those measures, Alicia could put them in the model. And we'd see which ones are really making a difference. So that's not either or.
You're going to be in school a lot longer. You'll never get done. Bobby will keep going, well, do this.
It sounds like fun to me.
All right, council members, anything else that we want to raise at this point?
All right, this was really good.
Very wonderful. And I should say for council members who aren't able to be here, who may be on the phone, and also others, we're going to put this will be on the Early Learning Division website. And Alicia promised me she'd put little markers in that said, if this presentation is here. So the slides will be there, and the audio recording will be there as well, so that people can access it and start to play with what we know so far. And maybe you'll get some of those emails as a result. So thank you all very, very much. We really appreciate it. Thank you. Council, I think we're, should we take a short break? People feel the need for a quick little break? Yes? Okay. So we're going to take a very short break. We are not going to be able to act on the consent agenda, so we're going to hold that over to our next agenda in April, but we're going to act as if. We don't want to stop the work, so we're going to keep moving, and we'll redo if we need to at that point. And then when we reconvene, we'll talk about the health end of things. So we're going to be in recess for 10 minutes. Okay.
And you want us up first, right?
I don't know about two, but two, yes. All right, well, we are back in session. Thanks, everybody, for being back on time. So we have the next sort of segment, as I mentioned earlier today, we talked about the education end of the bridge between healthcare and education, which is us. And now we're going to talk about the healthcare end, and we have two parts to the conversation. The first part is a budget note, and council members, you'll remember that we got this budget note, or the division got this budget note in the last session, and we want to give you a bit of an update about where we're at with that and what the plans are going forward. And then the second part of the conversation is the relatively, I think we've talked about this once or twice, but we're in process of shifting the Comprehensive Early Childhood Systems Grant over to the council and the division, based on the statutory direction to have the council and the division be the home for the coordination of early childhood policy and activity in this state. So just because we have a weird schedule because we started late and all of that, what do you ladies, can we do this in like 15 minutes? No, we can't do it in 15 minutes. Can we do it in 20, 25?
We might. 20, 25. What do we did have 45, I think. We can do it in less than a half hour.
Oh, did you have 45? Okay, I'm sorry, I misread that. Okay, can you do it in less than a half an hour? That's what our goal will be. Okay,
Yeah.
great.
yeah, We'll try. We'll rock
right.
and roll.
You just
If you
can't
guys
ask
don't ask any
questions,
questions, we'll be done in about 20.
All right, it's all on us.
All right. And I'm not over there, so I don't have any questions. Okay, so. I know. So, thank you, Chair Curtis. What we would like to do today is go through SB 5507 budget note and our progress there. And the other two presenters with me have asked that you all hold your questions to the end so that we can get through it in kind of a logical manner. And I want to specifically thank Nikisha, Kate, for everything that they've done. We've done this as a partnership with the Oregon Health Authority, maternal and child health sector, specifically Kate, and then the Early Learning Council. We also have brought in DHS on this particular project, and I think that's been a really important and critical piece because they too have some home visiting early childhood pieces that can touch and intersect with what this budget note tells us. So it's been a great experience having everybody in the room and nodding their heads up and down in agreement, understanding that this is the direction that we need to take and that all are getting input into this process, which I also think is quite critical. I also want to thank Janet for everything that she's been doing on the Best Beginnings. She's my other Early Learning Council counterpart on the Best Beginnings, and her counsel and insight's been really quite valuable. We have 3 subnotes on this, or what we're calling bullet points, and one of them is the screening tool, which we'll get to in a second and explain that. I had Benjamin Hazelton kind of do a subgroup on that over the last 2-3 weeks, and have cornered Janet in my car over the last 24 hours, and she's now going to chair that piece of the budget note. Nikisha did the professional development team, and Kate did the metrics. We've brought together people from all areas that have an interest in that and have their input. They've met anywhere totally from about 4 to 6 times on that piece. We've met with 3 initial meetings with larger groups to vet this, and then we had it in front of Best Beginnings twice, with the last time voting to proceed with the recommendation that the Early Learning Council accept what we're going to start to present. Okay, so next slide. Oh gosh. If I do this backwards. There we go.
There you go.
All right, so just as review, this is the budget note, and the first one was to develop a set of outcome metrics. We've talked quite a bit about outcome metrics over the last couple of days with the hub here, the CCO, other partners. So we've just kind of been rolling on the metrics piece. We're going to try and show you how those are going to mesh together. The professional development system was the second bullet in that budget note, which is where I get quite excited. So Nikisha has to keep calming me down on that. So does Kate, because I do get excited about this. And then the third is the Common Program Agnostic Screening Tool. And when we get to that, we're going to explain why we feel we need to send a recommendation to the legislature to do away with screening tool and go to entry questionnaire. Our intent is to ensure home visiting and early learning program success in reaching children and families in need of services through integrated early learning, health transformation, and home visiting systems. So you can see that this budget note really touches more than just the home visiting system, although that's been a large focus of what we've done. It also is talking about early learning, health transformation, so we also know that this budget note is integrating all of the system within the early learning side as well as the health side. The budget note was developed out of conversations between the Early Learning Division, Oregon Health Authority leadership on how to best integrate home visiting within the early learning and health system transformation. And that's happened over the last couple of years. Legislature just gave us the budget note, and now we're on the clock because Megan and Lynn have to report back to the legislature June or July 1.
They decided September.
Oh, well, don't tell us because we're going to be done.
We need it done soon.
Yeah,
Yes.
we're
We need it done.
going to be done because we also have the next timeline, which you'll see, which is the post-budget note. This work, even though it's there, it is a long-term process. Let's see what's next. This is you.
This is you.
This is me? Okay. So accomplishing the task, the Early Learning Council, the Best Beginnings Committee, was charged with developing the recommendations. So we brought together, as I've already explained, Early Learning Council, Early Learning Division, Oregon Health Authority, DHS, OSU came in on a couple of the budget notes, gave us their input and where everything was. We asked for community health. We have received technical assistance from national organization called 0 to 3. And there have been, I want to say, about 50, 60 people involved in what we've done. Mm-hmm. So it's not been just, a small little group. We've reached out and we've tried to get to everybody. Staff from Early Learning Division and the Oregon Health Authority Public Health Division have facilitated this process right here. Again, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I think we're headed towards a pretty good product.
All right. To just continue our approach, we needed to define home visiting. We talked about this last time, but just to review that it differs from like a home health care or probation home visiting. It's really about programs that strengthen family bonds and health and well-being of families. Our age range, primarily we're looking at prenatal to 5, but also recognizing we want that connection to the 6 and 8-year-olds. And we also wanted to build on what already exists whenever it's possible. So a couple of examples of that are the work that was done under the Maternal, Infant, and Early Childhood Home Visiting System, developing a home visiting entry questionnaire a few years back. They developed the Oregon Home Visiting Core Competencies. We are working on a home visiting data system called THEO, Tracking Home Visiting Effectiveness for Oregon, which will be a big player as we move through this presentation. We built on or looked at the Child and Family Wellbeing Measures Work Group. We also were looking at the Oregon Registry Online for part of the professional development work, and the QRIS system development through Race to the Top. So we're trying to look at what already is out there. So now we dive into the 3 big buckets. The first one we'll look at is the outcome metrics. If you remember from last time, we had 5 domains, if you will, that we wanted to put some metrics into. And they were looking at equity, looking at maternal, infant, family health, reducing injury and abuse, improve school readiness and achievement, and family self-sufficiency and coordination. So under each of these metrics, we've put buckets, we've put one or two metrics. And we wanted to start with improving equity across all communities. Our intent is that all these measures will be analyzed by subpopulations and reported by race, ethnicity, and country of origin, so that when inequities are identified and disparities are found, programs would need to address those disparities. I will say that you'll see, unfortunately, a lot of process measures in here, but we do know that if we achieve these process measures, we are going to have the outcomes that we need to really make a difference for our families. So, for example, here under improving maternal, infant, family health and well-being, the two metrics are prenatal care and well-child checks are completed on schedule, and parent and caregivers are screened for depression at intake prenatally in the first 4 weeks after birth and at 6 and 12 months of age. So if we can assure that families are getting that connectivity with their health care and for both mental health as well as physical health, we'll be going down a good track with that. Preventing childhood accidental injury and abuse and neglect. We have 3 under here. And again, some of these aren't fleshed out yet. We're still in draft. So we're working with our metrics gurus on these. So the first one is parent caregiver assessed for domestic violence at intake and every 12 months. Parent caregiver screened for substance use disorder at intake prenatally and at 12 months of age. And then this is one that we're still working with child welfare on how best to formulate this metric, but knowing that the number of substantiated child welfare reports, it's a very preventive. If we can get those kids early, then we can prevent some other pieces. With all of these, we did look at, we crosswalked them to the Early Learning Hub metrics, the CCO metrics, and what the Pew has put out that they have said are really seminal points of indicators that we should be looking at. All right, and then under school readiness, we will have 2 child development screening in the past 12 months and child social emotional screening in the last 12 months. So those are 2 that were that really impact school readiness, as we heard in the prior presentations. And then the last one, improving family self-sufficiency and coordination. We haven't quite defined it yet, but we're looking at something around maternal education achievement. We would like home visiting programs to have families screened for food insecurity and hunger. And then really kind of one of the big raisons d'etre of home visiting is referrals. And so we needed a metric around patterns of completed referrals and really identifying why referrals aren't getting completed, because there's lots of reasons why. And that gives us indications on how we can improve the programs. That's it for metrics.
That's great, thank you. So we'll talk a little bit about professional development. And kind of along the lines of what's been said already, the work groups were given a really tight timeline to come up with some considerations and some recommendations that really just need to be further fleshed out. And you'll see when we get to our timeline that our plan is to have work groups reconvene and work on a tighter work plan on how we plan on accomplishing the work that we're trying to spell out right now. So for this piece here, we really, before getting started, given that there was so much work happening already, there's so much already happening around professional development in the state, we began by looking at what exists. And as a group, really worked to honor the uniqueness of each of the different approaches that already exist, while working toward integrating some essential components of a professional development system. And again, really just seizing upon the opportunity to work toward an integrated early childhood system, which is, as we've heard through the meetings yesterday, previous meetings of the ELC, it's a priority. So some of the factors that went into the discussion and some of the considerations under the professional development component of the budget note work is around budgeting. You know, what would we have to budget? What would that look like, you know, for recommendations going forward? How would we incorporate a coaching and mentorship program into our plan? How would we engage community colleges and universities in a way that would incentivize them, but also incentivize the field, you know, to want to engage in professional development? how do we incorporate equity into every aspect of this work at the forefront, not as an afterthought? Then looking at compensation, how do we ensure that our workers are getting a livable wage? And so how do we tie that into this piece as well? Geography. How do we develop something that's going to respond to the geographical nuances that we know exist in this great state of ours, depending on if people live in urban, rural, or frontier communities? Okay. How do we, factor that piece in? And how do we track professional development in a way really building upon, again, systems that already exist? Okay. And then engaging in the public on sort of what we're doing, training the field on sort of what's available, and then really relying on a policy and structure that has the authority and the ability to help us influence the field in a very clear way. And we're going to talk a little bit more about some policy and fiscal considerations, but this piece here was really essential so that as we're looking at all of the budget note recommendations, it's through that lens of, okay, well, what is the authority, the governance body that is authorized to implement this? And then create the policies that need to exist across the different agencies that are publicly funding home visiting so that we can actually get to sort of our goal and our North Star with this work. So that's kind of what we talked about with professional development. Again, really stayed on a high enough level to just sort of get a sense of the direction that we want to go in with the plan to convene a work group that will work on an actual work plan that will detail out the steps to that work. So.
I'm going to add to that. There's a little ladder up there, and there's a reason for that. Our early on discussion was that through the professional development, there needs to be a ladder of success or a ladder of education. That we're not saying every home visitor has to come in with a 4-year degree or a nursing degree, but that each program has its own training, and how can we build on that and get them to succeed. And if there are folks who want to be professional home visitors, how do you get the certification that goes with that? Or how do you get the attachment to a degree? Or do we have a separate pathway through a university or community college that gives you a home visiting degree, but also tacks in to all of the other early childhood programs that are there and the education that exists? How can we build on this ladder instead of here's the program and go from there? So there's a lot of work that a work group's going to have to do to this, but these guys have to hold me down because I get really excited about this. When I think about where Oregon can be as far as a leader in professional development, not only for home visiting, but in early childhood. And that'll be one of the pieces that we're going to show you later. I mean, there's going to have to be a significant investment on the part of our legislature.
You're up.
Oops, wrong way. So I want to talk about the entry screening tool and the agnostic screening tool. Thanks, Megan.
Not about programs, it's about kids.
Yeah. A little bit of history here on the screening piece. We've tried several times over, I don't know how many years, 20 probably, Pam, maybe 25. And the most recent one was when McVie came and we put together another, what we thought was going to be this universal screening tool. And my process at the time, which both these ladies were involved, I just kept doing on the Nike piece, just do it, just do it. Well, it got shelved. And here we are again now, back at another starting point of needing or saying that we need a universal screening tool. The reality is that we'll never get all of the programs together on a screening tool because we'll have a 50-page screening tool. What we've come to the reality of is that there really needs to be an entry questionnaire that takes the higher level 5 to 10 questions that most or all of our home visiting programs are into and start to do that method of, I'm a mom, I'm in the hospital, I'm being interviewed, Here are the questions. Have you had abuse in your life? Are you stable and secure? Do you have enough food on the table? Where are those entry points? And then saying, okay, these questions, you're good to go. You're a pretty well established mom that's not going to have or shouldn't have any problems, and so we'll just give you that pat on the back and go. But then there's this other segment of the population which says, I was abused and neglected. My husband is abusive towards me. I'm scared to raise my child because I've had these problems in the past. Then you kind of can delve down where those families are, where those moms and dads are that need the help. The next question comes, and we'll give Yamhill as an example. They have all of their programs sitting down at a table once a week. Once they've gone through all the questionnaires and they've developed an entry questionnaire that says, okay, this family's fine, this family needs help, where can we put them, what's the best program to help them with, and then go to the next step of HFO or NFP or maternity case management or Cocoon going in and saying, we're the program that can best help you. The other question, which I found interesting this morning in conversation we had, is like, well, if we have 3 programs available for a family, do we put them or do they choose? And I'm very much on the you choose the program that you want, because that's part of self-choice. If we only have one, then we only are allowed to say this is the choice, at least for the moment. But to give that family their choice of where they need to go. Maybe it's early Head Start. Maybe they need a lower level of help. So this is the idea behind the questionnaire, and I think we've gotten acceptance and nodding of heads all the way across the segments in programs that, yeah, they'd rather have that than go to one particular questionnaire or have 6 programs go in and just rocket fire on these poor families and ask the questions. So that's where we're at on the entry screening tool.
I just wanted to chime in on that as well, that the real emphasis here is on a common set of data elements.
Right.
So the questionnaire tool is great, but not essential. Really, those elements are the most essential piece to this.
And we get a lot of people pushing back when we use the word screening tool or entry tool, because all the way across disciplines there's a definition of what screening tools are or what that entry tool is. And we're not necessarily looking at it as the tool, but the program has their own tool. Does that make?
Yeah, it's the language we kind of came up with at the last meeting was it's a scan of programs and the family, and trying to see what program the family might be eligible for, but not doing an eligibility entry tool for that specific program. So, for example, you scan, is the woman pregnant, how many weeks gestation? If she's prior to 28 weeks gestation, then she's eligible for nurse-family partnership, so she could be referred to that along with other programs too. But each program then, once they hit the program, has their own eligibility entry tool there for that program, and they're all very different.
Which goes deeper in. We also want to be very cognizant of those programs or those communities who have developed their own questionnaire. We don't want to be the big state government coming in and saying, here's your questionnaire, you have to use this. What we'd rather say is, here are the data points, here are the questions. We need you to make sure that they're filtered in within your own entry questionnaire, but for an area like we found out this morning that this hub does not have an entry tool yet. Can we offer them our state entry tool and let them build off of that and be a help rather than Big Brother coming in and saying, here it is and you have to do it this way. We just need the data points to come back to us for research and information as well. Okay? All right. Oops, I'm going the wrong way. So here's the fiscal and policy investments. And I'll try and hit these best I can. When we first had this presented here a couple of days to the Best Beginnings Committee, I had to kind of laugh at the picture that we have. I said, well, the baby's kind of like the legislature, because look at the look on his face, you know, it's like, oh my gosh, we're going to have to give you money. And that's true, because we have Theo, as Kate mentioned, which is a database system. Right now, our database system is disjointed. A lot of them don't talk together. When we were talking to DHS, they have 2 systems within DHS, and they don't even talk to each other. So we know that we need to develop a broader data system that we can have all of our home visiting programs talking to and sharing information, and where we can get that data instead of having it in 6 places and never coalesced and never talking and never crosswalking families and never crosswalking any of the information. And this is one place that we desperately need a legislative investment in our statewide data system. And this goes, I would say, beyond the home visiting piece, because Theo, while it may be looking at home visiting, the database system itself, what's it called? Not
TrackLogic.
Vistalogic.
Vistalogic.
Vistalogic has all kinds of doors and entryways and platforms that we can enter other data in with other programs. So if we make the investment in this, at least for me, in this system, we have the ability to start spreading that out into other programs. The capacity and resources for the community engagement, the training, technical assistance. This is the educational or professional development piece. If we're going to ask community colleges, which there are a few, Southern Oregon, one of the, I think it's Southern Oregon, has an area right now where they're giving certificates for home visiting. But how do those translate if that person moves to Baker or Bend or Portland, and we don't recognize or know that particular certificate? Do we want a university like OSU to help develop that? And if they do, which I hope we can get them all talking together, because they've done a lot of the work already, it just kind of, we get to a level and then we bump down again, and we, bubble up. There's a lot of it out there, but we need the investment to bring that system together so that number one, it's not disjointed. Number two, we know what it is. We know that it's a quality system, and we know we're getting what we want in those home visitors. So there is a monetary responsibility there. Then the governance structure has popped up to provide support and oversight across all state agencies that fall under the budget note requirement. Who's going to be responsible? And our thought process, which we've had quite a bit of discussion on, is that there needs to be a governance structure probably on the level of the governor's office to help coordinate all of this, because it doesn't just cross the early learning division, it doesn't just cross DHS, it doesn't just cross Oregon Health Authority. And so how do we do that? It's kind of what I call how do you get everybody to play nice in the sandbox? And without a governance structure, I'm not sure we'll get there. So I'm going to let Kate talk about the timeline. I do want to make a couple of comments before I let Kate and Nikisha do timeline. We forgot to tell you up front, we did look at some other structures. We looked at Vermont and New Mexico. They're a little bit ahead of us on some of this, so we did look at what they had and like some of those ideas and have pulled some of that our direction, still making it very Oregon-esque. And then our report, we're hoping to have not the final draft, but a draft done by April 1 for Megan and Lynn, and then input as well. Okay?
All right, so we realize this can't happen overnight, that if we're going to get folks on board, that we need to go out and train folks on the entry data points, on the outcomes. We need to develop the tools to help do that. We've got to get Theo, the data system, to accept the data points, engage the communities, train the home visitors. So that work we do have resourced between July and December of this year, 16. Where we start to then not have the resources to continue rolling this out start in January. So that's where we can begin to collect this data for among the McVie sites, because we've got that resourced, and Public Health and Healthy Families Oregon. But anything beyond that would be, we would need more resources. So we need to start working with the legislature on investments needed to fully implement the budget note. And then once we get that, we can do the ongoing, as resources allow, continue to support rolling on the other programs and implementation of the professional development system. So that's why the timeline is a little bit more extended. I know that the budget note talks about July 2016. That's sort of the point where which we have the work plan going forward for the next year and a half.
So I think what's not reflected on this timeline, though, is what happens between now and then, now in July. And with that is really just being able to articulate the recommendations, get approval for the direction that we're heading in, begin to draft the work plan, and also get clarity, because when it comes to something like Theo, which is a part of McVie for Healthy Families Oregon, it was out of a business need that we decided to use that as well, but really transforming that into an actual policy. What is the policy that needs to go forward that then can be, we can have resources attached to. So this way we're not just, meeting our business need and then meeting the federal requirement for this grant, but really working in a more coherent way in a direction toward having this system for our home visitors and for our home visiting system. So I just want to offer that. And also in July, the intention is that the work groups that are going to be convened between potentially now and July, depending on how quickly things move, that's when work plans are going to be developed. The details are going to be sort of fleshed out, and then we can begin to work incrementally toward implementing the recommendations in the budget note.
I think when I first said, yeah, okay, Best Beginnings would take on the budget note, that it would be, these ladies were laughing at me at the time. I didn't understand, oh yeah, we can do this in about 30, 45 days. Yeah, right. Well, here we are several months later, just to the point where we know what the timeline can be from here forward for 12 to 18 to 24 months. So we can get to the answers on the budget note, but we won't get the work done by July 1. Okay?
Yeah, I think ready for questions. Bobby has some. I have a whole slew.
I'm
Janet might have
sure,
some.
and I don't know the answer to any of them.
Okay. My first is the tool. Is this the one Dina developed and that the home visitors met forever to agree on definitions and all of that?
No, that was the work that was done to set up the platform for the home visiting data system. So that was
It's
looking
different.
Yeah, it is different.
Okay, can you talk about what the difference is? Because that was to capture home visiting data.
Right. So that was the pre-work that had to happen in terms of going out to Healthy Families Oregon, the public health home visiting programs, Early Head Start, to map out what are the data they need to collect and their workflow, so that we could develop the interface of the data system of Theo for the end user, and make sure we were capturing all the, how it would work, how the referrals would work. So that was really...
That is Theo?
That is Theo, yeah.
Okay.
So now it's moved into being, now it is real, and it's called Theo.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then the question following from that. So it is. So I just wanted to know if I was thinking of the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that's Theo, and now our home visitors and all those programs, Early Head Start, are they entering their data?
So here's where we are in the development of the Theo data system, is that we have developed it, we've piloted it in one site of each of those three models since the McVie grant is resourcing it. because of the way we have to do IT projects, that was phase 1 and 2. We're now in the process of getting approval to move on to the rollout of Theo. So once we get DAS approval, then we can start rolling it out to all the McVie sites to be able to use. And then Healthy Families Oregon is moving in for their business need, as is public health. And so by the end of this year, we anticipate that if all goes well, we will have Healthy Families Oregon on it, all the McVie sites, and public health entering data into this data system.
And our Healthy Families Oregon database system that we were using is gone. We did not renew that contract, and it was not doing what we needed. So.
Okay. So I was really impressed with the substantive work that was done to get those terms and definitions, and so that's related to when you. So who are you adding to Theo? That's not in those programs. DHS is the only one coming in that's new.
DHS is not coming in at this
Well,
point.
DHS would be another one that could roll in.
Could.
Yes.
So when
And
you
so they
talk
have-
about that instead of a single form, you're going to do something that can result in that had shared data elements. I'm trying to think, if we already have Theo, what's the barrier to, I mean, you've already agreed on the hard words. I'm trying to figure out.
I think you're
It sounds
looking
like
at
we're
it,
going-
two different ways, Bobby.
Okay.
One is that there's how do you get to the family, and how do you, and we'll use the word screen, how do you screen them into a program? And then there's the collection of data that we need to make sure that the family's
Two are
progressing, that
related.
they're doing what they need to do. So that first piece, we've always had the hard time getting a shared ability to walk into the hospital, talk to you as mom, and decide if you're in need or if you're not in need. Theo is where we take, after we sign you up to the program, and that data and information goes in. So it's really two separate areas.
But they're highly related.
They are related.
They should be
They
together.
should be together because you don't want to get the information and then get the information again, or
Right.
define it
Exactly.
one
But
way and then
that's
define it another way.
kind of what happens now is that you go into the hospital
Yeah.
and your screening methods are different, or you get to a prenatal mom and it's different. We've forever not been able to coordinate the programs to get to that what you would call a universal screen, even though I don't want to use it as a screen.
That's what we haven't had Theo to be able to do that. We now have the data system that can do that. So everyone can put their data in, and then it can be accessed based on roles. We should probably bring to you a demonstration of Theo
Yeah,
so that you
I'd
could look
love to
at it,
see that.
because
I'd love to see
it's very modular in terms of the Healthy Families Oregon collects. There's common data that all collect, but then there's specific data that the models collect, and that's all
And will the
modular.
screen, I know we're not
Yeah.
calling it the screen, but let's
Right.
call it the screen.
Yes.
That makes sense to everybody.
Yeah.
Will the screen be a piece of that common data
Yes,
set?
absolutely, as would the metrics. So that's why we haven't been able to move forward with implementing this entry tool, because we haven't had a place to commonly collect the data.
Okay.
And that's what Theo will provide for us.
The way I understand it is that right now, Theo can be used as case management
Yes,
for programs.
exactly.
And then the layer that needs to be, and the nice thing about the platform that's being used is you can do case management and higher level work. So case management system is being piloted, it's working its way through the way technology projects work in the state. And then what I understand that you're recommending is a set of common elements that would go over the case management. Programs have to case manage, but to have an integrated system,
Right.
you have to have a set of common things that you're collecting and
But
common
they've already
outcomes
done
you're
that.
achieving.
But the data has to go in.
I mean, I think that they've done this work of hammering out
Yeah.
what to collect and how to define it, and
Right, and we've got that. It's just saying, as a result of this budget note, what are we agreeing to in the entry to say that we're going to have everyone have as that common entry.
My concern is that those data elements should not be redefined so
No.
that we have one set
They are
in
not.
Theo and one set
No, we're
in
not
whatever
saying
you call
that at
that.
They are not. And in fact,
That's my concern.
right, no, they
Because
won't
the way
be.
it's being described, it's like, well, this is completely separate.
No,
And it-
sorry for that confusion because
Yeah,
it's
no,
not.
I mean, you have to screen, we have to be able to screen the family in. And, okay. And that's been a stopping point in a lot of places.
So the home visiting entry tool questionnaire that was developed 3 or 4 years ago with McVie and the new baby questionnaire, those were two that we used also in that same process that you remember, where we were doing the harmonization across all the different programs. So all of those data elements are in Theo already, but it's a matter of defining which of those we're requiring all programs to collect as that common entry level that we would have access to as a common entry pool. I don't know if that helped
Yeah, no,
clarify
no,
that.
that's very helpful, because it was
Okay.
like, you know, as long as
Right.
we're building on
Yes.
rather than.
I don't want to start over, Bobby. I frankly, and I say it all the time, I'm tired of doing something, it goes on the shelf, and then 6 years later, we pull it back off, we do more work, and then it goes back on the shelf again. I made a commitment to the Best Beginnings group that I want to get this out the door and using it, instead of, as you say, it's been developed, but where is it and what's going on with it? It's the McVie one went on the shelf.
Well, because we didn't have a data system to be able to implement it.
To put it into.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's where we are now.
Okay,
So,
so
Bobby, do you have more questions?
I have
presume?
one more. In all the conversations about professional development, I don't see parent education, but I know in the field we've parent ed is in the conversation,
Yes.
so
Yes.
it's just not listed.
Right.
Okay.
These were just examples.
We,
Sorry.
we actually have two buckets in that, Bobby. One is the professional development for the home visitors, the people that are in the field. And the other one is, that parent piece. And when we had the first initial meeting on the professional development, who was it that
Denise
Rennekamp was a part of that.
Yeah, came and gave that presentation. So we know we have two buckets, really, the parent piece. But there is some parent education, or a lot of parent education, that comes within the program, too.
Absolutely, it's all intertwined.
Yeah, so, but I guess the bigger focus that I've tried to take is, because we know we have a lot of that parent piece done, is the professional development for the person that's in the field that's going to be the professional home visitor. But it's there, we just didn't put it up there.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm done.
Yep. So, do you have any questions? Because I have several.
No, I've heard this.
Yeah, okay, you got it.
in my
It's in
brain.
your brain, okay. So I have several, and I apologize because they're at different
okay.
altitudes. So,
Like I said,
metrics.
I can't answer any of them.
Yeah, let's go to metrics for a second.
The metrics.
So, I think I have two on this one. One is maybe a comment and one is a question. The metrics were, and you said this, Kate, the metrics were largely process metrics. I really want to push us to think beyond the process metrics and to think about what happens as a result of, now fill in the blank with your favorite process metric, right? What happens as a result of screening new moms, I'm making up, for maternal depression? What happens? Something's supposed to change as a result of that. I really want to push us to think about that, because it's really not just about the act of screening. It's about what happens as a result of the outcome of that screening.
Screening is the means to the end.
Right,
Not
and-
the end.
And I worry that if we, and there was a little bit of this conversation this morning with the local CCO folks, and we've had this with the metrics and scoring committee at the state level. If we stop with process metrics, it's really hard to keep pushing it forward. So now is the time to be thinking about what is the change we're trying to achieve as a result of fill in the blank process metric. So I don't know what we need to do to do that, and if the council needs to do stuff to free up or to, I don't know what, but I think we ought to think about that. So that was that was a comment more than anything else, I guess.
And let me respond to the comment. I think you're right. We know that we're working between agencies, and so we're trying to be cognizant of that. I think some of our metrics or our needs need to be filtered in there probably a little heavier, and we may be a little light on that.
I agree.
Yeah.
That was actually going to be kind of my next question. So that would be helpful.
Yeah.
And then I have I guess, and maybe it's partly a question, but it's just really wanting to encourage us to use what we have already started. And I have this comment on metrics, and then I have it on the entry screen.
The bane of my existence,
Yeah.
that entry thing.
And so on the metrics, we're actually learning a lot, right? You heard the kindergarten readiness stuff here. We know a lot more from the CCO work in terms of what correlates with what in the health side. My organization's sitting on a boatload of human service corollary data. We know a lot. Why would we not tie why would not the answer to the what's the difference we want to make by process metrics be some delta, some change in those corollaries that we know are connected to the risk factors that our kids and our communities are facing? I mean, I think we have the information. I just don't see it carried through to this.
I think that's a valid point and a valid question. And I'd be real happy to get some input on what those should be.
Okay.
Because like I say, I don't want to say we rushed, but we rushed. I mean,
I got it.
even though we feel like we had a year, we don't have a year to get ready for a June or July 1 presentation of the legislature, which is now September, which we earlier were told it was going to be January. So,
Right.
I mean, we've kind of shoved, and I'm much more comfortable. I mean, sometimes you have to go slow to go fast, and we've had to go fast to go fast. So if there are some points that need to be in there, we want to know, and we want to get them in.
So entry tool screening thing questionnaire, yeah. So same point there. Why would not, when we are looking for what those 5 or 10 questions in the middle that are common to everybody, that's the overlay in Theo or wherever, why wouldn't those be areas that are historically correlated with the risk factors that we're trying to change?
I think that's what we want to do, right, Janet?
Well, because what I heard, so I would like it to be, because what I heard in the description was we're going to look through those questionnaires and we're going to pick out the things that are common. Well, that would be great, but they should be common. It shouldn't just be, that shouldn't be the criteria. It should also be what's connected to the data that we know that actually makes a difference in our communities, not just what's common across existing screening tools.
It does go back to, I mean, like you've said, this has been a 25-year event, and you get, and Martha, so, well, we're going to just let this rest for a while. But no, Martha and I are going out on this one. We're going to figure out something. I think we've made it too complicated.
Yes.
The questions are, like you said, we can measure what teases out what we need to know. Right. And we're still trying to finesse it with some of the local programs who, this is our questionnaire. We put hours and hours in on this, and you aren't going to take it away from us. So now that was part of the reason of looking at what are the common questions, so we could at least say, well, yeah, we heard that, and not make it more complicated, but figure out what we absolutely minimally need to do and start.
Okay. Right. So while you're doing that,
Yeah.
I have the families at my table at dinner last night in my ears, and I have the conversation we've had with the hub and the local healthcare folks here and the public health from the 3 communities here in my head. And entry form, entry screening, entry whatever, that's not very family friendly, and that's program friendly. We want it to enter into our program. Can we find something that's much more child and family appropriate and
A
friendly.
welcoming summary.
Yeah, Julie Manning had great words today. I don't know that I wrote them down.
Yes, that's
A
right, she
gift.
did.
I think one of the words was a gift.
Yeah.
A gift to the family. I don't know if anyway, I don't know that I
Right,
have.
but I mean,
Oh, I
I
know it there.
really want to encourage us to be careful about how we.
Oh, no,
So while you're working on this, that would be my little
Yeah,
pretty
because
please
I mean,
with sugar on top. But
we'll
can
go
we
back to what
please
we
stop
call.
thinking
I
about
mean,
this
you walk into
from
a hospital
programs.
room and say, "Hi, I'm here with my agnostic screening tool," and
What the?
yeah, I'm going to kick
No,
you out
that's
of the
my
room.
big thing.
However,
There's a lot
that
of people who
language
don't
is
want to
very
be
intentional,
agnostic.
and it goes to what Pam just said. It should not be about the program. It should
Right.
be about the things that we know historically challenge families.
Yep.
Understanding which families have those things and
Right.
catching them, and then sending them to the people that do the services so they can figure out where folks fit. So
Right.
it can be
Right.
called anything.
Whatever we
But
want it,
I
yeah.
think what I'm hearing, there's two things that I think are really important next steps for this report. One is to make sure that the metrics are processed to outcomes so that we can kind of see what that looks like. And
Okay.
two is that whatever information we're collecting about families prenatally or at birth, which is the first point where we can sort of catch them and wrap around them, need to be common data elements that correlate to what we know makes a family or a mother or a baby need some support.
Right.
And then we can name it whatever we want, or we can name it nothing, because I think if I just had a baby, I really wouldn't care what your tool was called.
Yeah.
But I think that's what I think that's what I'm hearing really urgently from Pam
What was so
and Bobby,
different
is that
about
to not make
today-
it about the program.
What today, I mean, when she described it, it was, so we have this gift for the parent. And it kind of similar to your Canadian experience. I had it in Madison, Wisconsin. I'll tell you, if you have a baby and get it, you know what it feels like. Somebody says they're there for you anytime you need them, and it feels really wonderful. Anyway, but she called it a gift, and it was full of goodies, like room was in there, and I think we're all saying the same thing.
Whatever
that
the words are, we're saying the same thing. But it's not about the program, it's about the family and
It
the
is
child.
about the
Right,
family.
and the common data points actually point to what we don't have the list with us because we're still working on, but they tap into these pieces that make you more. I hate to say risk factors, but they're risk factors. So, are you is your home safe? Or are you experiencing some sort of violence, emotional, whatever? Is there substance use? So these are the things that are going to put families more at risk and more at need for home visiting. So that's all. Those are parts of the data system.
And there are ways to ask that aren't threatening either. And all the programs have worked through very carefully how to do some of that asking, and we want to make sure that the common data points are that way too. I mean, I don't want a home visitor in any one of the programs to walk in and say, "So, has your husband beat you up lately?" No, we want to go in and say, do you feel safe and secure in your surrounding? I mean, there's a way to ask that gets to it, but if the spouse is sitting there, it doesn't register with the spouse.
I guess I would just ask that you do one more look to make sure that the data elements that we are learning about and now have data to connect to actually show up, that it's not just all the stuff we've always been thinking about. Maybe it is that, but it should be driven by the data that we have and the data that we know to exist.
I think there's a little bit of, again, two levels on this. It's how do you figure out what family has to come in? And then there's what do you collect on that family as you go through, like domestic abuse and violence, okay? We know that's a risk factor and an indicator, but that's a screen in, but then what do you do to, as you have them in the program, to make sure that you're making the change in the family so that abuse and neglect goes away?
So I have two more, and then I know we need to move on, but I'm the problem child on this one. So I have a question and then a comment. So my question, switching to professional development, question about, as we're doing that work, how are we connecting to the child care career pathway system and also the community health worker system that has been set up by the community colleges for the CCOs?
They're all at the table.
Okay.
And so the work group that convenes to create the work plan is going to be representative of all of the different pieces of work occurring right now. We don't want to recreate anything, and we definitely want what moves forward to reflect the large body of work that exists.
Should harness it.
Build
Yeah, absolutely.
on what we
That's-
have.
that's
That's
what-
why I pointed
use
the
it.
ladder. We want to build on what we have and go up the steps of the ladder instead of starting all over and saying, well, your program doesn't work.
And we also want shared learning.
Yes,
So
that's
that
the
the
point.
health
That's
workers
the point.
are getting the same, so they're all speaking the same language. And we've talked about that. And of course, Terry has been not so subtle in encouraging us to keep everybody there. So it is, we aren't going to have three parallel systems. We want everybody in the community to come and hear the same thing and speak the same language and have common goals in supporting their families.
Because they move across.
Yeah.
And they have a common core of knowledge that they all need to have. And in fact, they move from one of these career paths, or, I mean, they're all low wage, so it's, but it's still a career path. And, and they move back and forth.
Yeah.
So it really, thinking holistically.
Yeah, and we do have that in the thought process. We've had that in the conversation. We've had that in the meetings. We're all there. I will tell you though, there's so much out there, and it feels like, and I'm not the expert in this, but as the outside person, I feel like it's here and here and here and here and here, and there's no interconnecting system to bring it all together. So even what we do is going to take us time.
Megan has a comment, and then I have my last comment or question, and then we need to move on to the next topic.
Yeah, just to respond to the professional development piece, to sort of take some of the anxiety out of the conversation. As council members know, I think we're working on a legislative concept and a policy option package specific to professional development for the early learning workforce. And sometimes childcare can take up the most space in the conversation because it's so big, but that legislative concept is inclusive of the workforce. So all the work that needs to happen to create articulated pathways for childcare also needs to happen for home visiting, and it's in that package that's being prepared to be turned in.
Thank you, that's very helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
because our conversation, we've had conversation with Megan. She knows a lot of the conversation that we've had, and I assume that's how you're filtering that in prior to getting the report. But
Okay.
yeah.
So my last one, and then I'll be quiet, I promise. So if I'm the legislature, so I guess I'm trying to figure out what it is that I'm asking us to do here. I think what I'm asking us to do is to be careful in how we talk about this when we make the presentation to the legislature, and in particular careful about this slide. Because if I'm the legislature, if I'm a legislator, I'm going to be frustrated, particularly when we get to this slide, because I think I've made a lot of investments in this early childhood system, and you're asking me to make more. And some of these investments I've already made in
other forms.
Well, in other forms or in large measure. And I'll give you one example.
Okay.
Why do we need a governance structure when the legislature passed House Bill 4165 and said we have a governance structure? It's the Early Learning Council. So I think we have to be careful, particularly to the extent that this comes to the Early Learning Council, to go in front of the legislature and say, we're your governance, I'm being a little facetious, but
I
but
get
not
it.
really. We're your
Yeah.
governance council, but we need a governance structure. There's something very, I'm very worried about this.
I get that, Pam, I really do. The conversation that occurred at a couple of the meetings was though, but if you have home visiting in 3 different agencies, who's the decider of where we're at on that?
So once again, I think we have direction on that. And that is, and here's what I would say, I mean, having been in those seats historically, I gave you a place to work it out. I gave you a policy body. I told you to work it out, and if you haven't been able to work it out, I'm going to decide. So I think we have to go a step beyond what you have here, and not just say, and council members feel free to disagree, and not just say, thank you, but we need more, or thank you, but we need a different governance structure. We need to tell them, if we really need a different governance structure, we have to tell them what's not working about the one that we have.
Okay, maybe it's not a governance structure.
I would just say if you go back to Senate Bill 909 and House Bill 4165, the reason the council exists is not to oversee the early learning division, it's to oversee the early learning system. Correct. And that language is in there on purpose, and it's pretty clear.
Okay, so
I think part of the discussion on where this came up as well is that the budget note was a part of health and early learning.
Yeah.
So I think that's where this came, not that the ELC doesn't have the authority.
But it's a fair question for them.
Yeah, I
the
hear
ELD
you.
doesn't
I
have the
hear you.
authority.
Right.
This body does. And so it's a fair question to say. That's what I'm asking us to be really careful about how we talk about this. It's a fair question. If we were to come with this, I would say, so what's not working?
okay.
Because if it's not working, I can
through.
fix it.
Well, and I think there's a health authority seat on the Early Learning Council, and there's also a DHS
And education.
seat. And education. I think that's a good point, and I think we were trying to think of, like, you have three, like she said, three groups, and maybe we just need to, we were thinking, like, well, who are we going to tell DHS what to do? Am I going to tell DHS? Am I going to tell Oregon Health Authority? Or do we need somebody to tell all three of us? But the way you put it makes sense.
That's why they put them all here and said this is the place.
No, you're giving us another thought.
Yeah. She's not the place. We're the place.
Yeah, I want to be really clear. I'm not advocating for myself. It's easy to forget what statutes from 5 years ago say, right? So, but it's just a reminder.
All right. Sorry, I'll stop now.
No, I'm okay.
I had just a really practical question. The prioritized data elements, which we just had lots of conversation about, when will we see them? Will that be sort of the next time that because I understand you guys are giving us information month to month as you're working it out in chunks month to month, which I think we need to be understanding of, but I also like that it's coming back for conversation, and so it's not just like you're doing work and then 6 months later or 9 months later we see the end product. It's like a nice conversation that we're having here.
Yeah.
But I'm just curious to see what those would be, because I think that helps answer a lot of the questions that surface. I know they're still being worked on, but
It will.
where
They were
is
just a
that?
little too premature still to bring
Still too
to
long.
this
Okay.
update, but we're almost there. Yeah.
And you'll get the report on the first, and yeah.
Yeah, and then whatever holes are in there, I mean, let us know, because that's the report that you and Lynn are going to present.
Yeah.
So
And we'll have the chance to give feedback on it.
I hope so. Yeah, please. Don't be bashful. Don't redline it on us, but just, yeah.
Great.
All right. Well, thank you. Sorry. Thank you for, you
No.
said no questions,
We're
and then we
really-
gave you lots. We have strong feelings about this.
We're really excited about it.
It's super
I'm-
exciting.
I'm
Thank
excited
you for taking it
about
on.
it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
to Janet, too. All right.
Okay.
So we're in the home stretch. David is going to come join us and talk about the Comprehensive Systems Grant. And then we also have one item of public testimony, and then we will be adjourned. So David, can we do this in maybe 10 minutes?
Oh, I can do it in even less.
Name that tune. I can do this in.
David might be a little tired.
Well, and actually, I was going to apologize in the beginning because I realized this is probably a fairly fuzzy presentation because we just submitted this grant proposal on Saturday. It was officially due Tuesday of this week, so it's a little close and blurry still. The grant's supposed to start in August, so we will find out sometime in the next couple months whether we will be one of the 15 states that receives one of these grants. So I just want to give a high-level overview. This is coming out of U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. This had a competitive grant with awards going to 15 entities. And one of the really unique pieces of this grant is that while there's a sort of the grant recipient is an entity at the state level that can support early childhood comprehensive systems work, it's also really asking that recipient to work very closely with communities to really develop innovative strategies, and is really interested in the communication and scaling between that local work and that statewide work. So the purpose of the grant is enhanced early childhood systems building to improve outcomes for child development and family well-being, and grant really defines that fairly specifically as looking at population level increases in age-appropriate developmental skills of children in the communities that you've targeted. And then another purpose of the grant is to develop collective impact expertise at the state, county, and community level. And once again, you see the importance of those multiple levels in what we were being asked to propose in this grant. So this is I think one of the reasons I think I was asked to present about this grant proposal, because I think when it was described to some of the Early Learning Council members, it seemed to align with so much of the work that we're doing. So really the focus of this grant is on the intersection of health and early learning, integration of community-based and state-based systems building work, real focus on 2 generational strategies, that collective impact approach, particularly with a focus on shared outcomes and metrics, a focus on how are you going to scale what you learn locally through peer learning opportunities, and then also a real focus of building off McVie activities. So I think also what this grant's asking us to do really builds off of some of the work that you were just hearing about right now as well. Sorry, it's a little messy side. So what we the 3 objectives that we've really focused in on for this grant proposal that I think align with what you've just seen are really 3 things. When you look at the challenges of a 2-generational approach, it's really, that's what we've been talking about, is how do we make our work really about the needs of families and starting with families. And I think that's what the 2-generational approach is. And so the focus of this grant is sort of two elements that I think are really some parallel sets of issues. One, when families, how do families that have risks, particularly maternal depression, how do you help identify those families early, but also make sure that it's not just about screening, but about that full, what are the community systems that are in place that really help families connect to services, connect in a meaningful and thoughtful way, and think about the full needs of families. And what we know is really a parallel set of issues around developmental screening. It's not just about, I think as was said eloquently, screening is a means, not an end. Really, the role of screening is to help identify children and families that need additional supports, and make sure that those supports are available to them in a meaningful and a thoughtful way that once again looks holistically at the family need. And I think one of the things that we've learned, and then the third is, we also know that the importance of the social emotional skills are so important and so tied to both those sets of issues that we talked about earlier. How do we also work on building the capacity of programs to support the development of positive social emotional skills? I think also ties back to the earlier presentation today. And I think what we know in this work is there's so much to be learned and figured out really at the local community level of what those pathways look like, what those hands-off are, and what those supports are. So I think that's one of the really exciting things about this grant. The 2 communities that we propose to work with for this grant are Yamhill County and Lincoln County. So it's really wonderful to also be working with one of the hubs proposed in this. And those communities were identified because of some of the great connections, I think some of it which you heard about this morning and yesterday, between early learning and health, some of the great connections that are happening between hubs and CCOs in these communities, and some also great opportunities to leverage McVie work that's also going on. This is, I just couldn't help end with this is just a org chart that we proposed for this project. But I think what I do like about it is also shows that I think one of the things that I think that makes this an exciting potential for Oregon is because of the system of hubs, because of the system of CCOs, and because of the system of peer learning that's been developed in each of those, I think we have a real opportunity to learn things in local communities on the ground and really think about, and have the systems already in place to think about that scaling and dissemination of that work. And so the rest is we just find out whether we're awarded.
Good job, David.
I'll just say what really excites me about this grant is that, and it is the opportunity to do some research and development with non-state general funds on what happens after the referral, and then that we're having the opportunity to focus on maternal depression, which is so highly stigmatized, and the impact on children's social emotional development. And so we hope that we get it. It's a chance to really learn something without using Oregon taxpayer dollars through general funds on it, and then it gives us the chance to get at some of the most stigmatizing and isolating things that can happen to a mother and her young child. So we'll see.
And I really like I love this grant, but I like the thread of consistency that started in the conversation with the CCO. I'm sorry you missed it this morning, David, with the CCOs where they were talking about, really starting their home visiting and parent education with childbirth education.
With the pregnancy
and
test.
With the pregnancy test.
She said Julie should be
she
captured. She
right?
said, you get your pregnancy test, and as soon as you got that in your hand, we're there to give you our gift.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And this is just the last conversation about the possibility of carrying that through into the,
great.
And then this, and it's just super exciting. So
I was just thinking, I didn't want to add to it, but they should start a little earlier, like the mother's health before.
Yeah.
They're kind of set up for it, but that could be next year.
So, David, do the communities, are there going to be dollars in the community to actually do different things? I mean, I'm not clear that this is a systems level or if it's really on the ground.
It's asking us to do both. And so there's a little bit of dollars at the state level and a little bit of dollars at the community level. The other feature that's really important for this, which I didn't talk about, is it's also wrapped in a federal collaborative learning structure as well.
So we learn from other states.
Right. So that the local communities will also be part of federal learning collaboratives.
that's fabulous.
Yes, and that was another part of the grant. So it's multifaceted.
That was the 12th minute. All right. Other questions for David? Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Yeah, we're super excited. All right, Marilee, you're up next. Marilee is our sole provider of public testimony today.
Marilee Haas, Oregon Association for the Education of Young Children, and I had written 3 things, reflections, but in light of the time, I'm only going to share one of them with you that I think is the most critical today. As somebody who's just really supportive of the concept and the work that we do and wanting to improve the quality, I'm really concerned that recent events from DHS doing their first of their unannounced monitoring visits have really damaged the reputation in the community and the collaboration we're trying to do. Just because one inspector did not present himself in a professional way, we had scared children, scared staff. We now have at least 2, and I don't know how many more, programs that were shut down and lost their ERDC funding. And to me, that is so damaging because it is spreading throughout the community about how government is interfering, you never want to collaborate, you never want to do that, and it just undermines everything that we're trying to do. And I hope as a council you can use whatever influence you can to be sure that we are really doing our work professionally and that people are held accountable for that. And that was all I had to say today.
Thank you. It's
Chair,
something we're
can I
concerned
ask
as well.
Marilee a question?
Marilee, just sure.
Marilee, I caught a little bit on the news and I didn't catch all of it. So could you explain a little bit deeper for me? Was it, you had a child care setting where you had DHS kids and they went in and on
Unannounced monitoring, which
Okay.
is appropriate, but one, they were not monitored. The inspector who came had not professionally dressed, not driving a state car, and their identification looked photocopied. And you're always taught when a stranger comes to your program to deny them, and because they, asked for proper credentials and denied access, rather than having any follow-up or any question, they were sent failure letters.
We can provide more detail offline. This happened
And I
under the
assume DHS is working on this,
auspices
but
of DHS ERDC inspection. So we can, wasn't in our jurisdiction, but it clearly, to Mary Lee's point, reflects the entire
impacts
system.
the system.
That's right.
because it's one more instance where providers say, why would I ever collaborate? Why would I ever take these children? And when we want to increase the quality and these programs happening, it just undermines that credibility that we all have.
Sure.
So,
Okay.
Thank you
Thanks.
very much. Okay, so council members, I think this is the first time we've gone over.
Well, we started late.
We did. We started late. We had some logistical issues, but my apologies for that. But it's been a really amazing 2 days. So, great deal of thanks again to our hosts here in the Lynn Benton Lincoln Hub. We really appreciate it, especially appreciate the opportunity to interact directly with parents last night. And all of, interesting threads starting to come together. So council members, thank you for helping to sort of tease those out and put them together. Our next meeting is a one-day meeting, which is the 28th of April. And then following that, we'll be back out in community again, and to follow up with the conversation we started yesterday and the kind of the thread we continued. We're going to Eastern Oregon, and so plan on council members on the phone, council members in the room, plan on a road trip, plan on fabulous visits with communities again. And our primary thing that we want to dive into is less about programs and more about the capacity gap that we started to talk about yesterday in Eastern Oregon. And we're hoping to arrange opportunities to continue our conversations with our CCO partners.
And that's May what?
I don't have it off.
May.
I don't have it off the top of my head. 25th, 26th, or close to that. Appointments have gone out and they're saved on your calendars, but just so that people can do their planning, we will be in Eastern Oregon. Specific location to be announced. Alyssa's still working on that, but all right. Okay, thanks everybody. We are adjourned.